Chapter 701. For the first time in his life, Su Ming copied the art of berserker obliteration and created it. He might not be able to use this art much as his level of cultivation increased, but it was the first step he took to become a powerful warrior. The second time he copied it, he created the speed of the rock, allowing his speed to surpass his own limits. His understanding and control towards wind allowed him to obtain the Wind Berserker's legacy and master the 3 styles of wind separation. On this day, during his battle against Shendong, during the final style of the agreed-upon 3 divine abilities, Su Ming had copied it once again. This time, he did not use a drawing board, because his heart was the drawing board. This time, he did not use the brush in his hand either, because his soul was the brush of the universe. With Destiny's reincarnation, he watched time flow backwards, observed the changes in verdant abyssal seal, and fused his heart and soul into copying it. At that moment, the world Su Ming saw was surrounded by green fog. From a moment it first appeared to the moment it gathered into a seal and exploded with a bang. What was stirred up was not the power of cultivation, not the life force of the world, not the spiritual aura of the universe, but a wisp of the power of death that existed in the world. That power made Su Ming's expression change. It made his heart race against his chest, made his pupils shrink, and made his breathing quicken. He knew why a gigantic hole had appeared in the sky previously. He knew the source of the verdant abyssal seal strength. He saw that the hole in the sky had not been formed by the collapse of the sky, but had instead spilled out from the endless death fog behind the sky. As if it had been summoned by this place, it tore through the sky and descended. This was death aura. This was the power of death fog beyond the sky. 7 abyssal death seal. Verdant abyssal seal. A brilliant light appeared in Su Ming's eyes. If he had not borrowed Destiny's body to see the source of the verdant abyssal seal, if time had not flowed backwards, he would not have been able to see the source of the 7 abyssal death seal. If this was not the first time he copied it, and he had copied it to clear his mind when he was on the 9th summit, then it would have been impossible for him to see the source of the 7 abyssal death seal with just one glance. Green gradually appeared in Su Ming's eyes, but it only lasted for an instant before it disappeared without a trace. Su Ming closed his eyes. At that moment, Shendong widened his eyes in disbelief and shock. When he looked towards Su Ming, there was also a hint of disbelief in his gaze. The divine ability just now? Time reversal. Using this divine ability to observe my death seal, he actually managed to see some clues, and from the looks of it, he seemed to have gained some enlightenment. Just what kind of comprehension does this person have? If he really understood the 7 underworld death seal, this is impossible. Shendong laughed bitterly. He remembered that when he cultivated the 7 Stygian death seal, he'd used an extremely long time, and he was only barely able to grasp the first seal now. If Su Ming had truly managed to see through the essence and source with just one glance, then this would be a huge blow to Shendong. As Shendong laughed wryly, Su Ming opened his eyes. There was a green vortex shining in his eyes, and at the instant Shendong saw it, a loud bang rang out in his heart. "Thank you, Brother Shun." A focused glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and the green vortex in his pupils disappeared. With a stern expression, he wrapped his fist in his palm towards Shendong and bowed deeply. Shendong was stunned for a moment before he spoke hesitantly. You learned it? There are still some parts where I'm not familiar with it yet. I only managed to see some clues. This art uses my own will of death to stir up the aura of death on the ground to form a rune. It summons the death fog beyond the sky, and once it connects with each other, the death aura that is filled with death will erupt forth. Su Ming stated calmly. Shendong's breathing quickened. As he looked at Su Ming, his gaze was filled with shock, complicated emotions, and anguish. After a long while, he shook his head with a wry smile. "Fellow Taoist, among those of the same generation, I have only seen such great comprehensive abilities from Yi Wang. This battle has ended, and I have lost. Even if the 7 underworld death seal landed on you just now, with your divine ability to reverse time, it would have been enough for you to break this art. Shendong sucked in a deep breath and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards Su Ming. I fought to my heart's content in today's battle, and I've also gained quite a lot from it. I have a vague feeling that I'm not too far away from reaching a breakthrough. I have to thank you for this, fellow Taoist. But fellow Taoist, you must be careful. The death of an ascendant's elder from evil spirit sect is no small matter. I have a duty to fulfill, and I will definitely report it to my superiors. I hope that you will be safe from now on. As Shendong spoke, he cast a deep glance at Su Ming, then turned around and turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. Su Ming watched Shendong leave. After a long while, the green fog vortex appeared in his eyes once again. As it spun, Su Ming gradually lifted his right hand, and a green fog vortex also appeared on his right hand. As it surrounded him, a deep wave of aura of death shone within it. You're not from Death World. That's why it's so difficult for you to master this art. The senior who created this divine ability must have also come from Death region. Judging by Shendong's words, he must have learned this art in the land of immortals. If that's the case, if the senior who created this divine ability truly came from Death region, then how did he manage to walk out? Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the sky. A freezing glare appeared in his eyes. Sooner or later, I will break through this sky and step into the world that belongs to all of you. I can sense that this day isn't too far away, Su Ming mumbled. He clenched his right hand into a fist, and the green fog vortex immediately disappeared. He turned around and took a huge step towards Hidden Dragon Sect's branch, which was located at the crack of dawn. Almost at the same time, Su Ming headed towards Hidden Dragon Sect's branch. A gigantic dragon had crawled out of the endless sky above the land and the layer of clouds that had been covered by the black light before dawn arrived. That dragon head was yellowish-brown, and there was a murderous air within its dignified face. As it lowered its head, it swept its gaze across the land, as if it was looking at Su Ming's back. There was a girl sitting on its back. Her face was rosy, and she was still holding melon seeds in her hands. As she ate them, her eyes sparkled, and there was an intelligent look in them. He's an abyss builder that is incredibly rare in the Emperor of Abyss True World and is rumored to have gone extinct, and he has such comprehensive abilities. In fact, when I saw him fighting against the immortals in the lower realm of True Morning Tao World, the signs of the abyss appeared. I didn't expect that I would run into such a person here. The girl's eyes sparkled. No one knew what she had just remembered, but she gradually smiled. However, there was a smug look in that smile. He's a member of the Emperor of Abyss True World, and he's also a rare abyss builder. He also has such comprehensive abilities, and the signs of the abyss appeared. Just how much can I get from selling this guy? Just who should I sell him to? Should I sell him to old King Ming Ming, to old Granny Fu Shui, or directly to the Emperor of Abyss? As the girl thought about it, she immediately became spirited. She stopped eating the melon seeds, and excitement appeared in her eyes. Whatever. If I'm going to sell him, then I'll sell all of them. That way, I won't have saved his life in vain. Just treat it as my reward. But I'll forget about the Emperor of Abyss. That old man is too mean and stingy. He won't even give me a single cent. When the yellow dragon heard her words, it immediately shuddered, and fear appeared on its face. The girl's expression became even more smug. She lifted her right hand and grabbed the yellow dragon's head. The dragon shuddered and instinctively lowered its head, causing the girl to grab air. Xiao Huang, you're not being obedient. The girl glared at it, but her voice was incredibly sweet, causing all those who heard it to feel a tingling sensation in their bodies if they did not look at their expressions. The yellow dragon's expression was no longer fierce and awe-inspiring. Instead, it was filled with misery, and it closed its eyes. The girl grabbed the yellow dragon's head with her right hand at that moment. With one tug, the yellow dragon screamed in pain, and 3 strands of hair on its head were torn off. She brought out one of the dragon's hairs, opened her mouth, and blew at it gently. A wisp of her origin life aura floated out, and when it touched the hair, it immediately started burning on its own. As it burned, a wisp of white smoke floated up, but it did not dissipate. Instead, it gathered together in midair to form a ring-shaped circle. The circle was murky, and it could not be seen clearly. The girl blinked, let out a dry cough, and said in a sweet voice, "Grandpa King Ming, I know you can hear me. Stop hiding." The circle was still murky, and not a single change could be detected. By the looks of it, the white smoke was slowly dissipating, and before long, it would completely disappear. I saw a person with incredible potential, and the first thing I thought of was to tell you, Grandpa King Ming, but since you're not around, then forget it. I'll go and look for Granny Fu Shui. A look of pity appeared on the girl's face, but she stared at the ring of smoke without blinking. The white smoke on her face became even thinner, and a thought appeared in her head. "Oh well, it's just that this abyss builder isn't fated with you, Grandpa King Ming. Oh well." As the girl spoke, she lifted her right hand, intending to swing it at the ring that was about to disappear. However, the moment the girl said her final words, the thin ring of smoke immediately froze and no longer dissipated. Instead, it rapidly gained corporeal form. The murkiness within it instantly disappeared, and in its place was clarity. What appeared inside was a secret chamber. A white-haired old man sat cross-legged inside the chamber. His body was blurry, and it was impossible to see his face clearly. However, it was possible to sense that his eyes seemed to be piercing through the smoke and looking at the young woman. "Old Ming, long time no see." A playful smile appeared on the girl's face, and she lifted her hand as if she was greeting him. How impudent! How improper! You're always like this, always acting like a lunatic. This time, to avoid the wedding with the fourth son of the Emperor of Abyss' fourth son, you actually stole the passing world spirit. Do you know what kind of disaster you've caused?" The girl glared at him and said angrily, "Huh? I say, old man, why are you meddling in my private affairs? Why am I trying to avoid it? What passing world spirit? I don't know." As for the passing world spirit, she had a confused look on her face. The yellow dragon beneath her had a bitter expression on its face at that moment. Just as it was about to lower its head, the old man's voice came from the ring of smoke. "Oh well, I don't want to bother with this either. What abyss builders were you talking about just now?" The old man changed the topic and finally revealed the reason why he had appeared. Today was Singles Day. He had originally intended to release a chapter to comfort all his single Taoists and fellow Taoists, Su Ming, to fit in with the festival, but so that he would not be cursed at by the others, and to bless all of them for reaching perfection, he would release 2 chapters. 3 chapters was not good. He could not have a mistress. 4 chapters was not good either. Mistresses were even more troublesome. Now that he thought about it, 2 chapters was better. Everyone, take your seats. Happy holidays, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 702. I didn't say anything about abyss builders. I'm angry, so I won't tell you. A smug look appeared on the girl's face. She cast a glance at the old man in the smoke ring, and a look of pity appeared on her face. It's a pity for such a good seedling. He's so young, but he already has such astonishing comprehensive abilities. With his heart as his drawing board and his soul as his brush, he copied the changes in the world. As the girl spoke, she cast a glance at the smoke ring again. The old man's face might be indistinct, but could be seen that his expression was the same as ever. Not a single hint of change could be seen on his face, as if he was completely unbothered by someone with such astonishing, comprehensive abilities. Copying the changes in his heart and soul isn't much, the old man said slowly. With power equivalent to those in Ascendance, he fought against a cultivator in the second step. He schemed against them, and even if he didn't win in the end, he managed to put that person in the second step into a pathetic state, and he even managed to escape, the girl said again. This time, the old man in the smoke ring remained silent for a moment before he said, "He's a schemer. There might not be many who can fight against someone in a lower level of cultivation, but it's not rare either. Then what if he's young and has already shown signs of the abyss that he can reverse the flow of time. The girl said with a light chuckle, her expression as calm as ever. Yet once she said those words, the smoke ring instantly distorted, and after a moment, the old man's voice traveled forth swiftly. Reverse the flow of time? That's right. Based on my observations and my judgment, there's a 9/10 of a chance that he's the abyss builders who are rumored to have gone extinct tens of thousands of years ago in the Emperor of Abyss True World. The girl said smugly as she looked at the smoke ring. This time, the smoke ring remained silent for an even longer period of time, until the old man's seemingly calm but slightly excited voice traveled forth. Are you certain that he's an abyss builder and that he has the signs of the abyss? The girl did not speak. As she lifted her right hand, a jade slip flew out. That jade slip floated into the circle of smoke and shone with a dazzling light. Within that light was a scene of Su Ming fighting against Di Tian and Shun Dong fighting against him. Where is he? After some time, a low voice immediately came from the smoke ring. As the smoke ring distorted, the meditating old man could be vaguely seen standing up. Ah, how infuriating. For the future of the Emperor of Abyss True World, I would rather sacrifice my own future happiness and go out to search for your successor. Do you think it's easy for me? And he was misunderstood by others. Forget it, cough cough. 10 nether piercer swords, 100 netherworld pills, 300 spirit dispersing powder, and 1 chance at the netherworld pool. The young girl counted with her fingers as if she was suffering a great loss. You little girl? Fine, I'll give all of these to you. Tell me where the child is. When the old man's helpless voice rang out, the young woman beamed with joy. She produced another jade slip and tossed it into the smoke ring. With a flash of ripples, the smoke ring and the jade slip inside instantly disappeared without a trace. Within the Emperor of Abyss Expanse Cosmos, which was one of the 4 great true worlds, was a black continent floating in a vast space. There was no end to that continent, and there was no sign of human habitation on it. There was not a single hint of life within it. In the center of the continent was a desolate wasteland. Within the endless wasteland was a house, and at that moment, it was silently pushed open. An old man dressed in a long white robe walked out. His entire body was indistinct, and his features could not be seen clearly, but the hint of expectation in his eyes was clear. He's indeed an abyss builder. I didn't expect that there would be abyss builders in this world. The only troublesome thing is whether he's in true Morning Dao world or not. But even if he's in true Morning Dao world's in Death region, I might still have to go there and see for myself whether this person is real or not. As he spoke, he took a step forward, fused into the darkness, and disappeared without a trace. Almost at the same time the old man left, in another spot in the Emperor of Abyss True World was a black galaxy filled with stars. They surrounded an unknown area, and they shone with a brilliant light. Even if someone was very far away, they could still see them vaguely. There were plenty of cultivators moving about in the endless galaxy. In the depths of the galaxy was a lake, and at the center of it was an island. At that moment, there was a woman sitting cross-legged on the island. There was a black veil over her face, and there were stars shining in her eyes. Before her was a floating vortex, and within it was the girl with the yellow dragon's adorable and naive expression. Big Sister Fu Shui, 100 banyan water pills, 500 Milky Way stellar water, and you have to uphold justice for me and cancel my engagement with the Emperor of Abyss True World's 4th son. Then, I'll tell you where this abyss builder is. I'll be the first to tell you. If you refuse, I'll immediately tell old Ming. The woman with the veil frowned and glared at the girl in the vortex, but the doting look in her eyes could not be hidden away no matter how stern she was. When the vortex disappeared, a pensive look appeared in her eyes. There are still abyss builders in this world. Abyss builders. Tens of thousands of years ago, the last of them died in the raging disaster. When she said the words raging disaster, a hint of terror appeared briefly on the woman's face. It is said that the entire Emperor of Abyss True World was created by them. If this person is truly an abyss builder, then he will be the greatest treasure to the Emperor of Abyss True World. The woman stood up slowly, and as her eyes sparkled, she took a step forward and disappeared into the air. As for Su Ming, when dawn broke, he charged towards Hidden Dragon Sek's branch like a ghost. In his hand was a jade slip, and it was the item left behind in Hidden Dragon Sek's storage bag. The location of Hidden Dragon Sek's cave abode under Thousand River Valley was clearly stated on that jade slip. All the items that they did not manage to take away in time during the sudden disaster were left there. As Su Ming floated forward, he did not make a single sound, but he could still occasionally hear the faint screams of pain coming from within Hidden Dragon Sect. Those were the people from Evil Spirit Sect, trying to kill every last one of them as they plundered their belongings. Furthermore, the surroundings had been sealed into a cage. Aside from the old man, surnamed Gu, who might be able to escape with heavy injuries with his cultivation, the others would not be able to escape the seal even if they escaped the Thousand River Valley. That was why the faint screams of pain coming from all around him were also the sounds of the Hidden Dragon Sect disciples who had found a place to hide before they were brutally killed. Su Ming's expression was calm. He did not have any overflowing sympathy to stop this slaughter. This had nothing to do with him. This was a slaughter within the immortal sect. Su Ming floated forward quietly until he reached the bottom of Thousand River Valley, which was the canyon under Hidden Dragon Sect's suspension bridge. Then he stopped. Once he took a closer look at the jade slip in his hand, Su Ming spread his divine sense outwards. After a moment, he charged down the canyon once again. Before long, he stopped once again, and his gaze fell on the mountain wall before him. Everything there looked normal. It was covered in moss, and there was an ancient air to the mountain stones, a telling sign that they had been here for a long time. There was not a hint of any ripples of spiritual energy in the area, and neither were there any signs that the place had been excavated. As he stood there, a strange light appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and just as he was about to form a seal, a frown appeared between his brows. Once he lifted his head and looked above him, he no longer bothered himself with it. Instead, as he formed a seal, he continuously struck the mountain stone that did not seem to have anything strange about it. After a moment, as the sounds of air being sliced traveled forth from above, and as Su Ming continued casting those seals, the mountain stone that seemed normal immediately let out rumbling sounds. And as if a veil had been lifted, the moss disappeared, revealing a sealed cave abode. There was a groove on the door to the cave abode, and it was the size of a jade slip. Without any hesitation, Su Ming threw the jade slip in his hand and pressed it into the groove. Immediately, rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, and the door slowly opened. The instant the door opened, the sounds of air being sliced from above became even more rapid, and eerie words traveled into the air faintly. "Boy, where's the treasure you spoke of? If I find out that you dared to fool us, then my heavenly treasure streamer still lacks a main spirit, and I'll torture you until you die with a grudge." That voice sounded rather familiar to Su Ming. After a moment of pensive silence, he remembered that it belonged to the thin inner sect disciple who had wanted to perform the blood sacrifice on him on the flying enchanted vessel. Su Ming ignored him and walked towards the cave abode. The instant he stepped into the cave abode, the fog above him immediately tumbled about, and 3 long arcs charged out from within. The person in the lead was the thin inner sect disciple. The eyes of his 2 fellow disciples behind him were bloodshot, and with greed and anticipation, they followed closely behind him. One of them had a trembling young man under his armpit. Judging by the young man's clothes, he was a Hidden Dragon Sect disciple. The instant they appeared from the fog, the thin inner sect disciple in the lead saw the open cave abode on the stone wall, and he also saw Su Ming standing there. He was momentarily stunned, then immediately started laughing. "How dare an outer sect disciple come here to steal from us? Consider yourself lucky. Your grandpa's blood sacrifice has reached its limit today, so get lost." As the thin inner sect disciple laughed coldly, he charged towards Su Ming. In his eyes, Su Ming was not worth mentioning. If he did not move out of the way, then he would just kill him, What he cared about was the treasure that the hidden dragon sect disciple had spoken of in the cave abode. The two people behind him looked at Su Ming with cold and aloof gazes. As they charged forward, they'd already closed in on Su Ming. Only the young man from Hidden Dragon Sect, who was held under their armpits, stared at the open door with a dumbfounded expression. He noticed the inconspicuous jade slip embedded in the door, and his pupils shrank against his will before he swiftly looked toward Su Ming. "You're not moving out of the way? Since you're asking for death, then I'll fulfill your wish, you ant from the outer sect." When the thin inner sect disciple closed in and saw Su Ming still standing there, he felt slightly impatient. When he lifted his right hand, he was just about to kill Su Ming, but the moment he lifted his hand, he immediately saw Su Ming's eyes. They were a pair of calm eyes, so calm that it was terrifying. They were so calm that it was as if even if the world was about to crumble, not a single hint of emotion could be detected within them. They were so calm that once the thin inner sect disciple saw them, his heart instinctively trembled. It had been a few days since he last spoke to the others, and he had been holding in for a few days. Today was Singles Day. Thinking back to the past, he was still a free man, and he could even search for a way to stop being a bachelor on Singles Day. But now, he could only look at all his bachelor Taoists in envy. Ahem, I hope that everyone will bring out their respective magical powers and go celebrate the festival on this special day with vigor and vigor. Then remember to write a post about the festival and post it so that all of us can read it. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 703. If I didn't explode, I would be too embarrassed to ask for monthly votes. This is the truth, and everyone can see it. Last week's recommendation votes were also very, very miserable. Brothers and sisters, it's fine if you don't give me the monthly votes. I have no complaints, but the recommendation votes should be given to me. Please recommend votes. Please get into the top 3. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 704. The thin inner sect disciple had extraordinary power, but that was only when compared to his fellow sect members. In Su Ming's eyes, this sort of person had already provoked him twice, and there was no way he would continue letting them off. His expression was calm, and that calmness was a sign of indifference. The thin inner sect disciple's heart was trembling at that moment. He suddenly sensed a terror he had never sensed before from Su Ming, and it was especially so for those aloof eyes. When they fell on the disciple's pupils, it was as if two sharp swords had pierced through him and rushed into his eyes, seeped into his mind, and pierced his heart. They turned into tens of thousands of bolts of lightning in his body, and they started rumbling at the same time. The rumbling bolts of lightning shattered his mind and tore apart his soul, causing his breathing to quicken and his eyes to go wide when he was less than 5 feet away from Su Ming. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and dyed his robes red, causing the thin inner sect disciple to tremble. Countless bloody cracks immediately appeared on his skin, and they continued spreading out. In the blink of an eye, they covered his entire body. An invisible, mighty pressure that he could clearly feel was pressing down on his body like a huge mountain, crushing him to pieces. It was as if his world had completely collapsed at that instant. His heart pounded madly, until it seemed to be joined together. The emaciated inner sect disciple's face went pale, and a popping sound could be heard coming from within his chest. His heart was unable to withstand the pressure, and instantly exploded. As his heart exploded, even his organs were crushed under the pressure. His body was reduced to a bloody mess 5 feet away from Su Ming, and he crumbled to pieces. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere, but not a single one of them landed on Su Ming. It was as if even if the thin man died, he did not dare get any closer to Su Ming. Su Ming did not cast any divine abilities when the thin man died. In fact, he did not even lift his hand. He only used the might formed by his presence to suppress the thin man. As Su Ming's level of cultivation increased, This sort of presence could practically turn into corporeal form. Not far away, the fellow sect members of the two dead skinny men were all dumbfounded, and they were even more confused. However, one of them did not have the young man from Hidden Dragon sect with him, so he reacted slightly faster. With a pale face, he immediately retreated without any hesitation and turned into a long arc to quickly leave this place. Terror filled his entire body, and his heart began to tremble. Shock and terror filled his heart, and as he retreated, the only thought in his mind was to flee as far away as he could. A flash of crimson light swept past him as he fled. Confusion appeared in the escaping man's eyes, and when he wanted to lower his head to look, his head separated from his body and fell into the abyss. His body trembled and fell with him. A storage bag flew out from the corpse and was swept up by the crimson light. It charged towards Su Ming, and when it floated before him, its figure was revealed. Naturally, it was a small snake. After a few years, its injuries had healed a lot. Although it still looked a little weak, its body was complete again. "How much longer are you going to hide?" Su Ming patted the small snake's head. The snake put on a look of enjoyment and wrapped its body around Su Ming's arm. Su Ming's words were clearly not directed at the small snake. Besides him, there were only two other people in this place. One of them was the stunned, evil spirit sect disciple, and the other was the young man from Hidden Dragon sect he had clamped under his arm. Almost the instant Su Ming said those words, the evil spirit sect disciple's heart trembled, and he swiftly lowered his head to look at the Hidden Dragon sect disciple he had clamped between his arms. At the instant, he saw a freezing glare flash briefly in the young man's eyes. This was the last ray of light he saw in his life. In the next breath, the young man from Hidden Dragon sect lifted his right hand and swung it at lightning speed. Blood gushed out from the evil spirit sect disciple's neck, and with a muffled bang, the evil spirit sect disciple's body was torn to pieces, and he fell into the abyss. As for the young man from Hidden Dragon sect, he floated in midair with an incredibly grave expression on his face, along with wariness and nervousness. He wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming. "I am Sunshan from Hidden Dragon sect. Greetings, Senior. Since you know the way to open the cave abode, and you also have the jade slip for the cave abode, then I will not bother you any longer." Sunshan's heart was racing at that moment. As he spoke nervously, he slowly moved back. He could not tell Su Ming's level of cultivation, but if he could make the thin man's entire body crumble without attacking, then Sunshan could tell that he was at least in existence equivalent to those in soul transformation stage. In fact, there was a high possibility that he was equivalent to those in ascendant stage. Yet, right when he took 8 steps back, Su Ming cast him a flat glance. With it, Sunshan's footsteps immediately came to a halt. He forced out a smile, and just as he was about to speak, Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, a gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and charged towards Sunshan with a loud whistle. Sunshan's pupil shrank. He wanted to dodge, but after a moment of hesitation, he stood there and did not move. He simply allowed the wind to close in on him and turn into a whirlwind around his body. It swept up his body and charged towards Su Ming. It even shot past him and flung him into the cave abode. Eventually, he was pressed against the stone wall in the depths of the cave abode, as if he was sealed. With a calm expression, Su Ming cast a glance at Sunshan, who had been flung into the cave abode. If he had fought back just now, then he would have already died. If he did not fight back, then Su Ming was not someone who would kill on sight. Once he sealed him, Su Ming no longer bothered with him and stepped into the open cave abode. When he did so, he swung his arm, and the jade slip embedded in the stone door immediately fell off. It turned into a ray of crystalline light that fell into Su Ming's hand. As he entered, the stone door closed with a bang. If anyone looked from the outside, they would see that everything was the same as before, and there was not a single hint of anything amiss. Su Ming walked into the cave abode with a calm expression on his face. The cave abode was not big. Besides the hall in the center, there were 8 other chambers, and each of them was sealed off by a stone door. There was a runic symbol flashing on each of those doors. Each of the 8 runic symbols was different. They shone with waves of dark light, and if anyone looked at them, they would find that each of them contained a different meaning. It was quiet all around him. Su Ming stood in the hall, and besides the 8 stone doors and chambers, there was nothing else around him. Sun Shan, who was frozen on the stone wall before him, was also looking at Su Ming nervously. His heart pounded against his chest, and sweat broke out on his forehead. He was thankful that he had not chosen to dodge or fight back just now. He believed that his level of cultivation was nothing compared to Su Ming's. If Su Ming wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as crushing an ant. If he had chosen to obey this sort of powerful warrior, then perhaps he would have had a chance of survival. At that moment, he knew that he had taken the right step. Su Ming did not kill him, but only sealed him. Clearly, he did not want to bring unnecessary trouble to himself if he went out. As he laughed wryly, Sun Shan sighed in his heart. Even if he went out, he would not dare provoke Su Ming. Yet similarly, he grew even more respectful towards this unfathomable Su Ming. This respect came from Su Ming's cautiousness and thoughts. This old monster has great power, and his thoughts are even more meticulous. He won't allow anything to go out of his control. That's why even if I'm of no importance to him, he still sealed me in this place. The seal might be strong, but it didn't cause me any harm. This is also why I won't subconsciously feel too much danger, and I won't struggle recklessly. A glint appeared in Sun Shan's eyes. He had always believed that he was a cunning person in Hidden Dragon sect, and it was only because of his power and caution that he had managed to survive this disaster until now. That's not right. I'm afraid that even the reason why he didn't kill me is because he had his own considerations. Sun Shan's pupils shrank once again, and his heart let out a loud thump against his chest. He quickly lowered his head and carefully checked his entire body, and terror immediately appeared on his face. Su Ming ignored Sun Shan's wild thoughts. His gaze fell on the first stone door to his left, and a brilliant light appeared in his eyes. He stared at that runic symbol, and a feeling of wind spread out in his heart. In fact, a whirlwind had even appeared out of nowhere around him. Su Ming had the greatest understanding towards wind. After all, he was the scion of the Wind Berserker. As he sensed it, the light in his eyes grew brighter. With just one runic symbol, he managed to stir up the wind in space. In the midst of his contemplation, Su Ming looked towards the mark on the stone door of the second chamber. At the instant he focused his attention on it, everything in his world became indistinct except for the mark, and at that instant, he felt a wave of dampness. He tasted the scent of rain. That rain was light, but there was no end to it. There was also rain falling around him. The rain had appeared suddenly, and when it landed on Su Ming's body, the contemplative look in his eyes became stronger. After a long while, following his gaze, Su Ming sensed thunder roaring on the door of the third chamber. He also sensed lightning swimming on the mark of the fourth chamber, and a light and power that shook the sky and earth erupted forth from it. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning. Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the chamber to his right. Once he swept his gaze past them, he sensed the exuberant life force of spring, the scorching heat of summer, the intermingling of life force and the aura of death in autumn, and the stillness of winter when snow fell from the sky. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, Su Ming mumbled, and the light in his eyes grew brighter. Let's not talk about the items in these 8 chambers for now. These 8 runic symbols alone can already be considered treasures. If I can fuse these 8 runic symbols into my mind, then it'll be the same as me mastering the power of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, wind, cloud, thunder, and lightning. Su Ming lowered his head and lifted his hands. A glint appeared in his eyes. Is this a coincidence? For the 5 fingers on my left hand represent wind, cloud, thunder, and lightning, and 4 of the 5 fingers on my right hand represent spring, summer, autumn, and winter. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. With one move, he arrived at the first stone door to his left and sat down cross-legged. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the runic symbol on the stone door and copied it once again. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 705. Sun Shan stared at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. His heart was filled with shock. As a hidden dragon sect disciple, he naturally knew about the marks on the 8 stone doors. However, when he saw Su Ming sitting cross-legged before the first stone door, and by the looks of it, he seemed to be trying to understand the wind runic symbol, disbelief appeared on his face. A cold, derisive sneer also appeared in his heart. This person might have high power, but he's overestimating himself. Trying to understand hidden dragon sect's runic symbol? There are only a few who have managed to do this since ancient times. I refuse to believe that he'll succeed. Sun Shan thought to himself, but he did not dare show a single hint of it on his face. Time trickled by. The sky outside became brighter, and when daylight arrived, rain fell from the sky and fell on the ground, washing away the blood in Thousand River Valley. As thunder rumbled outside the cave abode, Su Ming's eyes sparkled as he looked towards the first chamber. He lifted his left hand swiftly, and with a swing of his arm, he wrote a runic symbol. That runic symbol was written in the air, but its appearance was exactly the same as the seal of the mountain gate. This was the wind seal. Su Ming had an extraordinary level of understanding towards wind to begin with, hence he was the fastest to understand it. The instant he wrote that runic symbol, a runic symbol gradually appeared on the pad of Su Ming's left index finger. Once that runic symbol appeared, the stone door to the first chamber slowly opened with a bang, revealing the chamber within. However, the chamber was empty. There was not a single thing inside. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Not a single hint of emotion could be detected on his face. To him, it was no longer important whether there were any treasures in the chamber. He had already found the most valuable thing in this place. These 8 runic symbols. Guyan Hai could not have imagined that he had been scheming and using Su Ming to block off his pursuers to give him time to escape. He had not paid much of a price either. He only had a few items in his storage bag and the jade slip that could open the door to the cave abode with the treasures in this place. That jade slip could be considered as a priceless treasure during normal times, because it was the only token that could open the cave abode, and because the cave abode contained hidden dragon sect's savings over the years. But now, the jade slip was completely useless to him, because the cave was already empty. Everything had been hidden somewhere else. However, he did not expect that the 8 marks on the stone door to the chamber would become Su Ming's greatest reward in his trip to Hidden Dragon Sect. These 8 runes were inherent to the Hidden Dragon Sect. In fact, they existed in every Hidden Dragon Branch sect. Usually, they were used for sealing. There were also rumors that if one had enough comprehension, they could sense the changes in the world from these 8 runes. Because these 8 runes were left behind by the ancestors of the Hidden Dragon Sect. In Hidden Dragon Sect, there were only a few people who were able to obtain opportunities from these 8 runes over the countless years. There were too many people who did not feel anything when they saw it. Hence, Guyan Hai had subconsciously ignored it. Instead, he thought that the item that had been taken away from the secret room was the treasure. If he knew about Su Ming's current transformation, he would definitely be shocked. Su Ming only cast a glance at the empty first chamber before he got up and went to the second chamber to focus his attention on it. Su Ming, who had been paying full attention to the runes in the second chamber, did not notice Sun Shan's widened eyes, as well as the disbelief and shock on his face. Sun Shan's breathing quickened. He had been observing Su Ming all this while. When he saw the wind rune appear on Su Ming's left index finger and saw the door to the first chamber open, all of these things turned into a powerful shock that made his heart race. He could not believe what he was seeing. It's only been 4 hours. He actually managed to understand the wind rune. Even if the 8 runes here are just copies and not the real ones from the immortal sects, for him to be able to understand them in 4 hours is... Sun Shan sucked in a sharp breath and only recovered after a long while. It was especially so when he saw that Su Ming was not resting and had gone to understand the rain rune on the door to the second chamber. Sun Shan could not help but become nervous. This time, he was not nervous because of his own safety, but because Su Ming's actions had overturned his train of thought. 12 hours later, when the sky outside turned dark once again, Su Ming lifted his left middle finger, and as a brilliant light shone in his eyes, he drew the mark of the rain rune on the stone door. At the instant he did so, a rune similar to the one on his index finger also appeared on the pad of his middle finger. At the same time, the second chamber opened with a bang. Su Ming did not even spare a glance. He got up and walked towards the third chamber. He sat down cross-legged and looked at the lightning rune with bright eyes. Sun Shan stared at the second chamber with a dumbfounded expression. His mind was completely blank, and that blankness did not last for long. Immediately, when the third chamber opened with a bang, fear appeared in his eyes as he looked at Su Ming once again. He was also not afraid of his own life and death, but of Su Ming's terrifying, comprehensive abilities. What sort of comprehensive abilities is this? Who is he? Sun Shan had a feeling that if the things he saw spread out and Hidden Dragon Sect learned of it, it would shake up the entire Hidden Dragon Sect. In fact, even the immortal sects would be shaken by it. 2 days later, Su Ming drew the lightning rune on his left pinky with a slightly tired look on his face. Once he placed it on the pad of his finger, the 4 chambers on his left hand were all opened. Su Ming did not look at the chambers. Instead, he lifted his left hand and looked at the 4 fingers on his left hand. Gradually, a smile appeared on his face. He had a strong feeling that his left hand seemed to be in control of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. He might only have a slight control over them, but it was as if he had planted a seed deep within his heart. At that moment, Sun Shan had gradually become numb to the shock of the past 2 days. As he looked at Su Ming, besides laughing wryly in his heart, there was only anguish. It did not matter whether it was his appearance or his level of cultivation. Su Ming's comprehension was terrifying. There was also his scheming. It might have been just a simple seal, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that there was a long way to go. If he was even the slightest bit careless, he would be doomed eternally. This old monster is either someone who has been walking down the path of cultivation for an unknown number of years, or he's one of the prodigies in those sections. Compared to them, I might not be as good as them, but the fact that I've reached my current level of attainment with my background is something that they can't hope to compare to. This was the only thing that could comfort Sun Shan's heart. Su Ming did not continue trying to understand the 4 runic symbols of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and rested for a moment. When his fatigue disappeared, he opened his eyes and looked towards the first chamber to his right, which was the spring runic symbol. Spring is the abundance of life, the awakening of all things. Su Ming mumbled. He looked at the spring runic symbol for several days straight. To him, a few days was just a blink of an eye, but he still could not completely immerse himself in the spring runic symbol. He could not copy it like how he understood the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. During these few days, the fatigue in Su Ming's eyes appeared once again, and it grew stronger. He no longer thought about anything in the world around him and focused solely on understanding and copying the runic symbols. Even if Thousand River Valley had already been occupied by Evil Spirit Sect after it was destroyed and turned into a branch of Evil Spirit Sect, causing this place to become a line of defense in the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands, as well as a foundation that would allow them to venture deep into the heart of Eastern Wastelands. During these few days, countless long arcs came and went in the sky. Not only were the people from Evil Spirit Sect occupying this place, there were also people from other evil sects who came to this place, causing Thousand River Valley to become incredibly lively. Compared to the liveliness in the world outside, Su Ming's cave abode was filled with silence. Su Ming's breathing was not heavy. His eyes might be slightly bloodshot, but he was still trying to understand the spring runic symbol. Su Ming's difficulty in understanding the runic symbol this time made Sun Shan let out a sigh of relief. He felt that if this was the case, then Su Ming was still slightly normal. If he truly managed to understand all 8 runic symbols, then it would be a huge mockery to Hidden Dragon Sect. This old monster might have extraordinary comprehensive abilities, but there's no way he'll be able to understand the 8 runic symbols of Hidden Dragon Sect so easily. He might only be copying them, but it's definitely not something that can be done so easily. Sun Shan cast a glance at Su Ming, and the cold sneer in his heart appeared once again. Another 3 days passed by. Su Ming's face was filled with fatigue, and more red appeared in his eyes. He stared fixedly at the spring runic symbol, and no matter how much he tried to understand it over the past few days, he just could not immerse himself in it. It was as if the life force contained within the runic symbol did not belong to him. In Death Region. For the first time in several days, Su Ming closed his eyes for a long period of time. In his head, he remembered the scene of his body rapidly aging and disappearing when he left In Death Region on the ancient bronze sword. Once that happened, what appeared in his head once again was the scene of his blood turning into aura of death on Fong Tsang Lan's hand before disappearing. Spring is the time when all manner of life is revived, and summer is the time when life reaches its peak. Autumn is the time when life is extinguished and when death awakens, and winter is the time when all manner of life is dead and cold. Su Ming's eyes flew open. He did not look at the spring runic symbol, but instead looked straight at the 4th stone door, at the winter runic symbol that symbolized the death of all manner of life. I'm in In Death Region, and the spirit of the world of 9 In once said that I'm dead. Besides, I can also tell from the things that happened to me that even if it's not because I don't want to accept it, there's a high chance that this is the truth. Since I'm a dead person, it's only natural that I can't sense the life force of spring directly, but I can understand the death of winter and reverse the order of spring, summer, autumn, and spring. I can walk down a path from death to resurrection. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He had been lost for many years and had never been able to see the path before him clearly. He had only been moving forward with a single thought, and at this moment, right outside the chamber in Hidden Dragon Sect's cave abode, he had discovered a path that would lead him from death to life by a stroke of luck. This path overturned the world. This path overturned the 4 seasons. This path would start from winter, and it would lead him to the path of life and death that would lead him to spring. If winter first appeared in the world, then when autumn arrived and the ice melted, the aura of death and the faint life force would replace each other. When summer arrived, the aura of death would disappear and the life force would erupt, allowing a person to successfully walk into spring. During that spring, they would be resurrected and wake up. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, where he looked towards the winter runic symbol and came to understand the path of life and death in his heart. He lifted his right pinky and swiftly drew the winter runic symbol in the air before him. With a bang, the door to the winter runic symbol opened. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 706. As the winter talisman gate was opened and booming sounds reverberated in the air, a shining runic symbol immediately appeared on Su Ming's right little finger. A freezing and destructive presence also appeared on his little finger. At the same time, as Su Ming looked towards his right little finger, he gradually saw that it was withering away. Its color was clearly different from his other fingers, as if it belonged to an old man. In silence, Su Ming lifted his head after some time. His expression was slightly different from before. He was surrounded by a still presence, as if he had suddenly become ancient. A faint sound of someone sucking in a breath traveled into his ears. It was the sound of Hidden Dragon Sect's Sun Shan's disbelieving gaze, causing his breathing to quicken. Su Ming had been unable to understand the spring runic symbol for several days, and at the same time, Sun Shan had let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he had also laughed coldly and mocked Su Ming in his heart. But when this happened before his eyes, he felt as if an invisible slap had landed on his face. It made all his sneers freeze and swallow all his mocking words. As his breathing quickened, Sun Shan stared at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression. Winter runic symbol. This is the final runic symbol among the 8 runic symbols in Hidden Dragon Sect, and it's also the most difficult one. He actually managed to understand it in an instant. The still and withering presence coming from Su Ming's body made Sun Shan feel as if an illusion had appeared before his eyes. In his eyes, Su Ming seemed to have turned into a big tree, a tree that had died and withered away in the harsh cold of winter. Perhaps this sort of tree was waiting for the arrival of spring, waiting for the moment it would wake up and be resurrected. As time passed by, Thousand River Valley had already been completely occupied by evil spirit sect when Su Ming's epiphany of the autumn runic symbol lasted for more than a few days. The atmosphere of war was incredibly thick, However, none of this had much to do with Su Ming at that moment. He looked at the autumn runic symbol and closed his eyes. After a moment, when he opened them again, he looked towards the summer runic symbol and eventually returned to the spring runic symbol. Because of me, I can understand the winter runic symbol in an instant, but autumn, summer, and spring are even more difficult. With my current abilities, it's difficult for me to understand all of them. There was no dejection on Su Ming's face, only clarity. Autumn represents the withering of the aura of death and the emergence of vitality. Summer represents the boundless vitality. Spring is the opening of the eyes. Su Ming had a vague feeling that when he understood the spring rune one day, it would be the same as him going back from winter to spring. It was equivalent to walking from death to life. He firmly remembered the autumn, summer, and spring runes. Even though he couldn't comprehend them and fuse them into his body, he used his memories to bring them with him, and used the passage of time to comprehend them. Su Ming stood up and cast a glance at the 5 open chambers in the cave abode. Without his knowledge, he had already been in this place for half a month. To him, this empty treasure trove was a gigantic treasure trove. As he swept his gaze across the place, Su Ming looked at Sun Shang, who had been frozen to the wall by him. A glint appeared in his eyes. At that moment, he was still in the state of the winter rune, and his entire body looked as if it had withered away. There was not a hint of light in his eyes, but when his gaze fell into Sun Shan's eyes, it made his heart tremble violently. He could not tell what sort of eyes they were. This was something that could not be described with words. He could only express it with his feelings. It was a feeling as if he had seen a corpse, but when his gaze met that corpse's, it had opened its eyes and looked at him. A dead man's eyes. There was no spirit, no light, no life force, no emotion. Even the aloofness was gone. There was only an apathetic calmness, and it gave off an illusion that would make anyone who saw it feel as if their entire body was rotting away. Sun Shan trembled, and even his teeth chattered. The feeling Su Ming gave him at that moment was simply too strong, so strong that it made his skin crawl, and he was almost scared out of his wits. Su Ming looked at Sun Shan, and after some time, he asked flatly, "Are there any other treasure troves in Hidden Dragon's sect?" Sun Shan nodded without hesitation, but there was nervousness on his face, and he shook his head. "Yes, but they're all empty now. What is your status in Hidden Dragon's sect?" Su Ming continued asking with a calm expression. "Hidden Dragon's sect's 9th generation disciple," Sun Shan said with a trembling voice. "Give me a reason not to kill you." Su Ming remained as calm as ever. Not a hint of killing intent could be seen in his eyes, but those eyes of a dead man in Sun Shan's eyes were more terrifying than any killing intent. "If you don't, you can return to the land of immortals now." Su Ming lifted his right hand, and when Sun Shan saw that withered little finger, his pupils shrank. As he trembled, a sense of danger rose madly within him, causing his face to turn stark pale, and he immediately cried out in a shrill voice, "Senior, I'm just a normal 9th generation disciple in Hidden Dragon sect. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Waves of still aura of death spread out from his lifted hand, and he pressed his finger towards Sun Shan. Instantly, a wisp of gray smoke drifted out from his little finger and spread towards Sun Shan. "You're still spouting nonsense. You lured the 3 people from Evil Spirit sect to this place because you wanted to use the rune in the cave abode to kill them. You also wanted to open this cave abode and hide here to avoid the disaster that would destroy your sect. Even if a normal disciple could think of this, they wouldn't be able to do it, Su Ming stated flatly. When he saw that the gray smoke was about to touch Sun Shan's body, anguish appeared on Sun Shan's face. After a moment of hesitation, he immediately spoke. I am the one with the potential to search for dragons among the 9th-generation disciples in Hidden Dragon sect. I know the method to break most of the seals in Hidden Dragon sect that are below the 6th seal. All the treasures in this place have been taken away, and some of them are hidden away. I might not know where they are, but if I return to Hidden Dragon sect's head sect, I can retrieve those treasures for you in secret. I swear, I can do it. I can definitely do it. Terror towards death could be heard in Sun Shan's voice. As he looked at Su Ming, a pleading look appeared on his face. The gray smoke spreading out from Su Ming's pinky stopped 3 inches away from Sun Shan. Even though there was no killing intent or chilling aura coming from that gray smoke, there was a hint of stillness coming from it, and it caused the life force in Sun Shan's body to become chaotic at that moment. It was as if the moment that gray smoke touched his body, it would immediately extinguish the flames of his life. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he suddenly asked, "Do you know the hidden execution of justice art?" Sun Shan was momentarily stunned, and his heart let out a loud thump. This hidden execution of justice art was an absolute secret even in Hidden Dragon sect. Very few outsiders knew about it, much less the name of this divine ability. Yet this person before him had mentioned this art right off the bat. After a moment of hesitation, Sun Shan said in a low voice, "I only know how to fuse 4 Daos together. I can only push it slightly. What is Bright Yang Stone?" Su Ming asked again. Sun Shan's expression immediately changed drastically. He fell silent and no longer spoke. Su Ming was not in a hurry either. He simply waited for Sun Shan's answer. After some time, Sun Shan cast Su Ming an anguished look and sighed in his heart. Bright Yang stones are the life force gathered by the immortals who descend in large numbers. They're the source that allows them to descend in Death region and activate their power. Every single sect has to prepare a Bright Yang stone to gather their souls before they descend. This stone is also an essential item for us immortals to leave this place. Bright Yang stone. Su Ming's expression was calm, but a thought had appeared in his heart. Based on his analysis of the karma behind Shindong's desire to snatch the stone, he could tell that while Sun Shan's words were partially hidden, most of them were true. It's no wonder why Evil Spirit sect wants this Bright Yang stone. It's practically an existence equivalent to a life stone. It's an item that gathers the souls of all the people who descend in this place. This is Death region, and outside is Bright Yang Void. If we descend together, then this stone must be able to prevent the power of Death from invading all the people who descend in this place. With its protection, all the souls of those who descend in this place will always remain in the state of Bright Yang. And once we obtain this Bright Yang stone and destroy it, then it will be the same as us killing a large number of those who descend in this place. Su Ming's gaze fell on Sun Shan. He had chosen to bring this person into his cave abode because he had some guesses as to why this person had lured the 3 people from Evil Spirit sect here. When he had interrogated him just now, even though his words were not trustworthy, he had still obtained a general answer. If I was Gu Yuan Hai, who only had his nascent soul left, and had a Bright Yang stone that Evil Spirit sect is determined to obtain after my sect was destroyed, then I would definitely not bring it with me. I would hide it. By doing so, I would be able to keep myself alive. If that Gu Yuan Hai was afraid of death, then he wouldn't be considered as such, but during the battle just now, he had the willpower to self-destruct his physical body, so he should be someone loyal to Hidden Dragon sect. If I was him, and this Bright Yang stone could be split into 2, then I would bring a small part of it away and use myself as bait in exchange for the chance to hide the larger piece of Bright Yang stone without being discovered. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He had already thought about these things when he was fighting against Shindong. That was why he had chosen to work together with Gu Yuan Hai. There was a possibility that there were no treasures in the cave abode, but he had still chosen to stall for time. Because stalling for time was not only beneficial to Gu Yuan Hai, it was also beneficial to Su Ming's analysis of the situation. There's a 2/10 chance that this Gu Yuan Hai is afraid of death, and all my guesses are wrong. But even so, I won't suffer any losses. There's a 4/10 chance that he hid the bright yang stone. There's also a 4/10 chance that he has a small piece with him, but there's a large piece hidden nearby. Su Ming narrowed his eyes, and a brilliant light shone in them. The more important this item is, the more anxious Hidden Dragon Sect will be. It would be fine if Evil Spirit Sect really managed to snatch it away, but if my analysis is correct, then once Thousand River Valley becomes slightly more stable, Hidden Dragon Sect will definitely hesitate as to whether they should send powerful warriors to sneak in and take it away. After all, this place is filled with danger. Perhaps I can create this chance for Hidden Dragon Sect. A pensive look appeared in Su Ming's eyes, but right when these thoughts appeared in his heart, Sun Shan suddenly gritted his teeth with a pale face as he looked at Su Ming. A resolute look appeared on his face, and he said something. "Senior, if you swear in your heart that you won't let me go, then I can give you a great gift. I can offer my life as a sacrifice in search for the place where my sect's treasure is hidden. If you like this work, then please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 707. Su Ming lifted his head and cast Sun Shan a glance. There was a resolute look on this person's face, and he looked as if he was willing to risk it all to survive. Yet while Sun Shan was intelligent and full of schemes, with the experiences Su Ming had gained through multiple life and death situations, he could still see some clues. He did not immediately speak. Instead, he cast his gaze on the ground of the cave abode. There's a spirit vein here. It's the best choice for me to recover my cultivation base quickly, but when I absorb it, I'll definitely cause a huge ruckus. It's not suitable for me to absorb it now. It'll affect my plan to lure Hidden Dragon Sect out. Su Ming fell into pensive silence. After all, most of his analysis was just a guess. As he thought about the feasibility and the pros and cons of his plan, a glint appeared in his eyes. I'll lure the people from Hidden Dragon Sect here first. If I succeed, then it'll be good, but if I don't, then I won't think about this anymore. I'll just focus on absorbing the spirit vein to recover my cultivation base and reach the Berserker Soul Realm. Su Ming made his decision and swung his arm at Sun Shan. Immediately, the gray fog before Sun Shan fell back and returned to Su Ming's right pinky. "Continue," he said slowly. Once Sun Shan said those words, he was incredibly nervous, but he maintained a resolute look on his face, not daring to reveal even a single flaw. He knew just how terrifying this person before him was. It did not matter whether it was his comprehensive abilities or his level of cultivation. Both of them far surpassed his own. Even if this person was just scheming, it would still be difficult for him to deceive him. I have the potential to search for dragons and can sense where the treasure is. The treasure might be hidden by a senior in the sect, but if I offer up my life, I have an 8/10 of a chance of finding it. As for the seal there, I can also break it slightly. I might not dare to guarantee that I can open it, but I can weaken it by a large amount so that it will be easier for you to obtain it. This is equivalent to me betraying the sect. I will use my life and this action as the price for you to make an oath in your heart. Once I succeed, you will let me leave." There was not a single flaw on Sun Shan's face. He looked as if he was ready to risk it all in despair. Even his voice and words were filled with his desire to survive. If it was anyone else, perhaps they would truly be affected by this person's words, but Su Ming remained as calm as ever. After casting a few glances at Sun Shan, he nodded. Sun Shan became even more nervous. He looked at Su Ming, and when he saw Su Ming nodding, his heart relaxed slightly. However, there were not many changes on his face. Instead, the resolute look on his face became even stronger. There's only one chance. If I succeed, this person will definitely die. If I fail, I don't think I will fail. Although this person is a schemer, I am confident that I did not reveal any flaws. Even if he is suspicious, no matter who it is, he will not refuse. At most, he will be skeptical and watch the situation unfold. Sun Shan looked at Su Ming and said through gritted teeth, "Senior, please swear an oath, or else even if I die, I will absolutely not submit to you." Su Ming laughed coldly in his heart, but his expression remained the same. "If what you said just now is true, I will naturally give you freedom after I succeed. Senior, please be." Sun Shan spoke again, but before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Su Ming. "I'll give you 3 breaths of time. Either you find the treasure or you die." A slightly impatient look appeared on Su Ming's face. With a swing of his arm, he released the seal on Sun Shan's body, allowing him to move, and his cultivation base was no longer sealed. The span of 3 breaths passed by quickly, and sweat broke out on Sun Shan's face. When he saw Su Ming lifting his right hand, he gritted his teeth, and the resolute look on his face became stronger. "Senior, please keep your promise." As he spoke, Sun Shan sat down cross-legged on the ground. As he formed a seal with his hands, he tapped his ears, and as his body trembled, 2 streams of blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes. At the same time, black blood also flowed down from his ears. Su Ming stood by the side, and a freezing glare shone in his eyes. He wanted to see just what sort of thoughts this person had. After a moment, Sun Shan's body trembled even more violently. He swung his right hand, and 4 black needles immediately appeared in his hand. Without any hesitation, he stabbed one of them into the center of his brows, another into the top of his skull, one into his heart, and the last one into his throat. At the instant the 4 black needles stabbed him, a strange light appeared in Sun Shan's eyes, along with a deep sense of fatigue. He lifted his head, and his gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the cave abode and look at the world outside. The 4 needles stimulated his soul, and the life force in his body was also stimulated, causing its potential to erupt forth. And by the looks of it, this potential was stimulated at the cost of burning his life force. With this method, he managed to make his body become empty, which somewhat fits what he said about sacrificing his life. Su Ming thought in his heart as he swept his gaze past Sun Shan's body. 78 leagues away from Thousand River Valley, the 3rd barren mountain, and the area of 10,000 feet around it, is where the treasure is hidden. Once Sun Shan said these words with great difficulty in his hoarse voice, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. When it did so, the 4 black needles on his body immediately started trembling. Sun Shan's breathing quickened, and he immediately brought out 2 more black needles. One of them stabbed into his dantian region, and the other 3 inches above his navel. "Senior, please take me there. I will break the seal for you." Once the 2 black needles went in, Sun Shan's complexion became slightly better, but there was a sickly flush on his cheeks. Su Ming could see clearly that once the 2 needles went in, Sun Shan's life force was burned a little more, which was why he was able to continue fighting. He no longer spoke. With a swing of his arm, he swept up Sun Shan and took a step forward. The moment his foot landed, Su Ming spread out his nascent divinity, causing him to disappear with Sun Shan. Once he warped out of the cave abode, Su Ming did not stop for even a single moment. He warped once again, and after a few times, he appeared beyond a barren mountain without attracting too much attention due to his rapid speed. This place was 78 leagues away from Thousand River Valley. There were 7 barren mountains around him. Once Su Ming appeared, he swept his gaze across the area, and his eyes landed on the 3rd barren mountain. That mountain was barren, and not a single plant could be found on it. It was also so normal that it was inconspicuous. Sun Shan's breathing quickened, and he spoke with great difficulty. "Senior, please place me at the top of this mountain. I will do my best to help you break the seal. I hope that once you successfully obtain the treasure, you will let me go on account of me burning my life force and betraying the sect." Su Ming cast Sun Shan a glance and nodded his head. If this person truly did not harbor any ill intentions, then he would fulfill his promise and give him his freedom. With one move, he brought Sun Shan to the 3rd barren mountain. Once he placed him on a big stone at the top of the mountain, Su Ming took a few steps back and swept his gaze across the area. This place was barren, and there was not a hint of any hidden presence. Could this person really be doing this? Su Ming also hesitated for a moment. He had been observing Sun Shan up to this point, and from the moment he started casting his art, he had not revealed a single flaw. It was as if he was truly searching for the treasure. The burning of his life force and the eruption of his potential were not fake. It was especially so when his body was empty at that moment. It was as if he was a bottle that was originally filled with water, but at that moment, the water in the bottle was vaporizing and the amount of water was decreasing. Sun Shan formed a seal with his hands once again before he pressed them against the ground. The entire mountain let out a hum, and a large amount of shattered stones fell off. Su Ming could vaguely see a stream of light appearing at the middle of the mountain. That stream of light was semi-transparent, and Su Ming could see the door to a cave abode under that light. Sun Shan's face turned pale. As he trembled, his hands were immediately lifted up by the force that seemed to have bounced off the ground. His body swayed, and once he coughed up blood once again, he swung his arms, and 8 black needles immediately appeared. They pierced into his body, and when all of them pierced deep into his body, there were already 14 black needles on his body. Su Ming could clearly see that a large amount of his life force was burning, and it was spreading out from his body. "Senior, I can only keep it open for the span of a few breaths. I will tell you the time later. You don't have to go in. You can just use your divine sense to take out the items inside." Sun Shan's voice was hoarse. His eyes were bloodshot, and sweat covered his entire body. Su Ming could not find a single flaw in his words. If there was truly danger in the cave abode, then he would have absolutely not asked Su Ming to send his divine sense in. Su Ming frowned and cast a glance at Sun Shan once again. Suddenly, a thought appeared in his heart. At that moment, most of Sun Shan's body was empty. The burning life force spreading out from his body was also gradually dispersing. There was originally nothing special about him, but with his current appearance, Su Ming found him to be somewhat familiar. Possession. No, it's descent. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. At that moment, Sun Shan's entire body was empty. It was incredibly suitable for someone to possess him, but it was even more suitable for a nascent divinity to descend. The nascent divinity descent art required a person to practice a similar cultivation method, and when his body was empty, he would be like a bottle without water. Other people who practiced similar cultivation methods could arrive in a short amount of time, even if they were far away, and descend on his body, just like a bottle filled with water once more. Su Ming remembered the 14 needles Sun Shan had stabbed into his body. As he observed them, he found that 7 of the 14 needles might seem to be used to stimulate his potential. But in truth, compared to the remaining 7 needles, they were clearly used to confuse him. The remaining 7 needles were used to set up a rune on Sun Shan's body with the patterns on his skin as veins. However, this rune was not complete. Once Su Ming swept his gaze over it, he could vaguely tell that 1 needle was missing. At this moment, Sun Shan suddenly raised his right hand and a black needle appeared in his hand. He held the needle without hesitation and fiercely pierced it into his left ear. Immediately, the veins on his face bulged. "Senior, enter now." At the same time he shouted, the flowing light in the middle of the mountain came to an abrupt halt, and as it rapidly dimmed, a gap was revealed. As the mountain gate rumbled, a crack opened up on its own, and a hint of supreme yang aura spread out from that crack. If it was anyone else, even if they doubted Sun Shan's words, their attention would be attracted by the opening of the cave abode, and they would naturally lower their guard against Sun Shan. What Sun Shan wanted was that instant a chance. At that moment, there was a chant echoing in his heart. Above the heavens, the 9-5 symbols, the center. "Master, please possess me." Why are the recommendation votes so pathetic? Yuan Fang, what do you think? To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 708. As Sun Shan roared out the chant in his heart, The presence of his life burning, spreading out from his empty body, immediately started changing based on some sort of law in the world around him. This change seemed to be resonating with the clouds in the sky, the stars, the wind around him, the terrain on the ground, and everything else. It also formed a close connection with the rune formed by the 8 rune spikes in Sun Shan's body. It was as if Sun Shan's body had turned into an invisible void at that instant. That void was connected to an unknown number of tens of thousands of leagues away, causing Sun Shan's body to turn into a medium that connected space, turning into a point where nascent divinities could move through. Sun Shan was laughing coldly in his heart. He believed that this plan he prepared was absolutely foolproof. Unless Su Ming did not believe in him at all and immediately interrupted him right after he started and killed him. Then as long as Su Ming was skeptical, Sun Shan had complete confidence that he could make Su Ming walk step by step into the land of death he had set up. Everything he had done previously was for the final moment. While Su Ming's mind was focused on the opening of the cave abode, he would erupt with all his power. He only needed an instant. Even if Su Ming noticed it later on, it would be useless. However, all the things in his imagination usually did not go according to plan in reality. Just like at that moment when Sun Shan was shouting the chant in his heart and asking his master's nascent divinity to use the connection point to descend into his body, Su Ming, who he originally thought would be looking at the opening of the cave abode, did not look the way he expected. Instead, he was looking at Sun Shan coldly. There was a hint of derision in that aloof gaze. Once Sun Shan noticed it clearly, he shuddered. To him, Su Ming's gaze was like a sharp blade that had pierced through his body. It was as if all the secrets in his heart had been exposed under that gaze, and there was nothing he could hide. Impossible. It's impossible for him to have noticed my thoughts. There was not a single flaw in what I did just now. Sun Shan's heart let out a loud thump. He trembled, but at that moment, he did not have the time to think too much. He lifted his hands swiftly, formed a seal, and struck his body. With a boom, Sun Shan's body trembled violently. A tremendous pressure suddenly spread out from his body, as if a strand of divine sense had appeared out of nowhere. That divine sense rapidly swelled, quickly forming a nascent divinity that occupied Sun Shan's body and took control of him. Right up to the end, Su Ming did not stop him. This action caused Sun Shan to be filled with ecstasy, but at the same time, he also became uncertain. The feeling that Su Ming could not see through his thoughts rose in his heart once again. "Have you finished descending?" Su Ming asked faintly. At the instant he said those words, Sun Shan's heart immediately trembled violently. All his luck had completely crumbled at this moment. He understood that the other party had clearly known what he was thinking, but he had still asked him to complete this descent. If the other party was not a fool, then he was definitely extremely confident. He was confident that even if he invited his master to descend, the other party would still be able to suppress him. But Sun Shan's awakening to these thoughts was a little too late. Almost at the moment these thoughts appeared in his head, his consciousness disappeared with a bang and fell into deep sleep. His divine ability had already been completed, and the divine sense that had appeared out of nowhere in his body had already grown so big that it had already gathered together to form a nascent divinity. He closed his eyes and tilted his head downwards. His presence also disappeared without a trace along with his consciousness. But the moment his consciousness disappeared, a terrifying, mighty pressure swiftly replaced his presence and erupted forth from his body. However, it was limited to a circular area of 10,000 feet, a telling sign that it did not want to spread too much out and be discovered by those from Evil Spirit sect. "Sir, you were so arrogant that you watched me descend. How do you expect me to repay your kindness?" A hoarse voice tumbled out of Sun Shan's mouth slowly with his head lowered. His eyes flew open, and a brilliant light shone in them like lightning. He lifted his head. As this person lifted his head, his body started rapidly aging. Almost in the blink of an eye, the person who appeared before Su Ming was no longer the young Sun Shan, but an old man who exuded an ancient air. His skin was covered in wrinkles, and his hair had turned gray. A powerful presence that did not belong to Sunshine was spreading out from his body in an increasingly deeper manner. If you want to repay me, then tell me how many Daos you can fuse with your hidden execution of justice art. Su Ming's expression remained the same as ever as he spoke flatly. Cracking sounds came from Sun Shan's body at that moment, and right before his eyes, Sun Shan's master slowly stood up. His eyes were like lightning, and as he looked at Su Ming, he suddenly started laughing. I see. So you covet Hidden Dragon Sect's hidden execution of justice art. I can fuse 6 Daos into it. At the same time the old man said those words, he took a step towards Su Ming. The instant his foot landed in the air, a powerful ripple spread out from his foot and swept through the area with a howl. It was as if the air had turned into a pool of water, and his foot had turned into a stone that had stirred up ripples. Those ripples might have seemed normal, but in truth, each of them contained the power of the old man's cultivation base. When they spread out and closed in on Su Ming, he lifted his right foot as well and took a step forward. At the instant his foot landed, the same ripple spread out and crashed into the ripples stirred up by the old man's cultivation base. Continuous booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the old man let out a muffled groan. He staggered a few steps backwards, and when he lifted his head, his expression changed. Great completion in the Berserker soul realm. The old man's pupil shrank. Su Ming moved, but he did not move back. He looked at the old man and spoke languidly. The early stage of ascendance. Yermania? Wushuang, Xue Sha, or Tianqi? Which one of Scarlet Thunder Heavens is it? The old man stared at Su Ming and said 5 names in succession. Su Ming was familiar with Qi Lei Tian, but he had never heard of the other 4. However, if the old man could say the names when he noticed that Su Ming was a berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm, then he must have the same level of cultivation. These 5 people should be the 5 berserkers who have attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm in Eastern Wastelands. Besides Qi Lei Tian, the other person should be the All Entities clan's progenitor who once fought against me across the sea. Su Ming did not answer the old man's question. As his foot landed, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he took another step forward. At the instant he did so, a vast amount of power erupted from his body and fused into his foot, causing the weather in the sky within 10,000 feet to change and a gigantic vortex to appear. At the same time, a huge foot manifested in midair. That step and that divine ability was the god of Berserker's 7 steps. The old man, Sun Shan's master, retreated swiftly. He was cursing in his heart at that moment. It was his nascent divinity that had come this time, not his real self, but if his nascent divinity was injured or shattered, then it would be a disaster for him. He did not expect that the enemy he would run into when his disciple summoned him would be a powerful berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm. If he had known this earlier, he would not have cared about his disciple's summoning and his survival, even if that disciple had the rare potential to search for dragons. Even if the presence of the bright yang stone had caused him to ignore everything else and descend here, all of this was not worth it in his eyes to fight against a berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm. After all, it did not matter whether it was his disciple or the bright yang stone. They were both external objects. Besides, the bright yang stone did not contain his soul, so he did not need to worry about his life. As he retreated, his expression turned dark. When he lifted his hands, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up a mouthful of blood. As he formed a seal with his hands and pointed forward, that blood immediately spread out and turned into a blood shadow that charged forward. Soon after, that blood shadow moved forward and turned into 2. Then, with another move, it turned into 4. When nearly 100 blood shadows appeared in the world, they charged towards Su Ming and the foot that was stomping down from the sky. Su Ming did not stop for even a single moment. He took 7 steps forward in succession, and once he took those 7 steps, the world rumbled. A powerful wave of impact swept outwards from the center of the place. As the loud booming sounds echoed, Sun Shan's master's face turned stark pale. As he swiftly retreated, blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth, and shock appeared on his face. He's not a berserker who has attained great completion in the berserker soul realm, but is halfway into life cultivation realm. He's equivalent to an illusory yin stage and a corporeal yang stage. The old man retreated without any hesitation. He no longer had any desire to continue fighting. At that moment, his only thought was to widen the distance between them and fight for a chance to leave this body. However, before he could retreat several hundreds of feet, Su Ming charged out from the impact and the collapse of the body like an arrow. Once he rushed out, he lifted his right hand, and wisps of black smoke immediately spread out from the air around him to turn into the Undertaker of Evil's spear in his hand. Once he grabbed the spear, he threw it forward. With a piercing hum, the Undertaker of Evil's spear turned into a long black arc that charged towards the old man. The old man's pupils shrank once again. He was at a disadvantage because he had descended and did not have any enchanted treasures on him. The difference in their combat abilities was too great. When he saw the long spear closing in on him, he lifted his hands swiftly and formed a strange seal. Then, like a vase, he pushed it forward. With it, a vase with flowing streams of light immediately manifested before him and crashed into the long spear. With a loud bang, the vase shattered, and the long spear pierced through the old man's right arm. As the thunderous rumbles echoed, the old man's right arm was crushed into a bloody mess. His face turned even paler, but he gritted his teeth and retreated once more. As he retreated, his presence would weaken slightly with every step he took. 6 steps to soul return. The old man had absolutely no will to fight at that moment. His only thought was to return to the hidden dragon. Once he took 3 steps back, his chi had already weakened by a large margin. Just as he was about to take his 4th step, Su Ming closed in on him. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 709. Su Ming was slightly faster than the old man. As he closed in on Sun Shan, he closed in on him like a long arc. The eyes of the old man who had occupied Sun Shan's body sparkled at that moment. He might still be 3 steps away from having his nascent divinity leave, but with Su Ming's speed, it was impossible for him to complete those 3 steps. His face was pale. No matter how he calculated, he could not find a way out of this predicament. He had no magical treasures, nothing to defend himself against. His cultivation base was lower than his opponent's, and his battle prowess was even lower. At this moment, the arrogance he had when he first arrived had completely vanished, and in its place was despair. In his despair, there seemed to be only one path in front of him: self-destruct. The self-destruction of his primordial spirit meant that his true self, who was in Hidden Dragon Sect, was suffering a catastrophe, and his cultivation base was greatly reduced in exchange for the other party's injuries. But he was not willing to do this. This was not beneficial to him at all. The old man now hated Sun Shan, the disciple who had summoned him, to the bone. Damn it, don't tell me he's really going to self-destruct. The old man was in despair. Unless he had no other choice, he would definitely not walk this path. This was something he could not bear. Even if he managed to injure them gravely, his real self's level of cultivation would also fall, and he might not even be able to return to the land of immortals. In fact, there was a high possibility that he would die in the chaos that would follow. He could almost predict that something like this would happen, especially when his cultivation base fell. It was not as if he had no enemies in the Hidden Dragon Sect. If he was not careful, he would end up in a miserable state, unable to advance or retreat. At that moment, these thoughts were the reflection of the old man's heart. All of this only lasted for an instant. When he saw that Su Ming was closing in on him, he was afraid that when his 4th step landed, Su Ming would catch up and interrupt him. What do we do? The old man's eyes were wide open, and sweat broke out on his forehead. His expression was one of anxiety, and just when he was about to throw caution to the wind, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed through his mind. Just his hidden eyes. That's right. The first thing this person said when he saw me was to ask me about the hidden justice eyes. The old man was able to cultivate to the ascendant stage, so he was naturally very smart. As this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly understood. Along with this realization, waves of bitterness arose in his heart. This person is very cunning. If the berserkers have someone like this, then they will definitely become a great enemy of us immortals. The reason why he waited for me to descend was because he wanted to obtain my hidden dragon sex art justice. I don't know where he heard this art from, but from the looks of it, he seems to have a deep understanding of it. He even knows that this art can be performed by anyone. That person must have also asked that disciple of mine, and the answer he obtained was probably not satisfactory. That's why I descended here. This was all part of his plan, and Sunshine didn't notice anything at all. He had intentionally waited for me to descend before asking that question. In truth, he had already calculated the result. He had determined that I would definitely not be a match for him and would choose to escape. He had also calculated my current struggle. He had also calculated that at this moment, I would think of the first thing he had said to me. Now that the situation is clear, he doesn't want me to self-detonate and get injured for nothing. He can let me go, but the price is hidden justice eyes. In his anguish, a resolute look appeared on the old man's face. At the instant Su Ming was about to close in on him, he lifted his right hand and swung it forward. Hidden Dragon Ninth Tao, harvest in autumn and hide in winter. As the old man's voice reverberated in the air and he swung his right hand, a cloudy look immediately appeared in his right eye. Hidden Dragon Eighth Tao, hide in secret. As he spoke swiftly, the seals on his right hand changed, and he tapped his right eye with a finger. Immediately, the cloudy look in his right eye seemed to have gathered together, and clarity appeared at the edges. Hidden Dragon Seventh Tao, hide in shadows. As he continued to speak, he took a third step back. His aura weakened once again, and the murkiness in his right eye fused with that of clarity. When he looked at it, it seemed as if his right eye was being concealed, as if it were a shadow that had been hidden from view. Hidden Dragon Sixth Tao, hide fire in sleeves. The old man lifted his left hand and changed the seal he made. There seemed to be faint sparks of fire flashing in his sleeve, and the light of fire instantly appeared in his right eye. As that light shone, his pupil turned into burning flames, and it instantly absorbed the sparks of fire that appeared in his sleeve. When anyone looked over, they saw that there were flames circling before the old man, and they surged into his right eye. At that moment, the four changes in his right eye, cloudy, clear, and illusory, were continuously alternating with each other, forming a strange sight that shocked people to their core. Hidden Dragon Third Tao, crouching tiger, hidden dragon. The old man let out a low roar and took the fifth step backwards. When he took it, his presence had already become incredibly weak. The nascent divinity in his body was also in a state of chaos, as if it was about to turn into wisps of divine sense. As he spoke, he changed the seals in his left hand, and a large amount of afterimages of seals appeared before him. They looked as if they were filled with fog, and as dragon roars echoed in the air, they connected with each other and turned into a roaring dragon. Almost at the instant the dragon manifested, blood capillaries appeared in the old man's right eye. As they intersected with each other, they turned into a clear Chinese character. The instant the king character was formed by the blood threads, the roaring dragon that was swimming in front of him charged into his right eye and fused with the king mark. Hidden Dragon Second Tao, hide deep, Ruasu. The old man let out a loud roar. At the center of the blood capillaries in his right eye was a dragon, and around it was a king. At the edges was an 8 trigrams, and there was also a blood-red light shining from it, causing his entire right eye to look rather enchanting. He lifted his foot at that moment. When he took his 6th step, he pierced his right eye socket with his right hand, and without caring about the intense pain, he yanked it out of his body and threw it towards Su Ming, who was walking slowly towards him with an indifferent expression. I was reckless in what happened today. I will give you the hidden eye of justice as a gift. We will meet again. The old man swiftly took his sixth step. He might have said that he had understood Su Ming's thoughts and was doing as he wished, but he was still worried that Su Ming would change his mind and remained on guard. If Su Ming did anything, he would self-destruct at all costs. When he took his sixth step, Su Ming caught the right eyeball and looked towards the old man. The nascent divinity in the old man's body had turned into divine sense, and as if Sun Shan's body was a void, it was sucked in and disappeared without a trace. Clearly, it had left Sun Shan's body and returned to Hidden Dragon's sect, which was an unknown number of tens of thousands of leagues away. Sun Shan, who had lost the old man's nascent divinity, fell to the ground. His unconscious body trembled, and blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. His breathing was weak, and he struggled to open his eyes, but as his eyelids fluttered, he lost all his strength and closed his eyes once again. He breathed his last and died. He did not die in Su Ming's hands. Instead, his master had sucked away the last bit of his life force before he left out of hatred. Su Ming cast a glance at the hidden eye of justice in his hand. Besides, the reason why he wanted to obtain this item was because he had seen its effects when Hong Luo possessed him all those years ago. The more important reason was that Hong Luo's inherited memories told him that Hidden Dragon Sect's ancient art, Hidden Eye of Justice, could break a large number of seals. However, this art was a little vicious. Not only could a person practice it on their own, they could also snatch it from others. The method was the same as just now. Once the right eye of the person practicing this art was snatched away, then that person would lose all the benefits brought by this art. However, it was not as if there was no way to break it. They could just snatch it from someone else. Su Ming did not know the specifics. He only knew the gist of it. At that moment, he lifted his left hand and swung it at Sun Shan's corpse through the air. Immediately, it turned into ashes, and only a storage bag was left behind. Once it landed in Su Ming's hand, he put it away into his bosom. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he looked at the barren mountain beneath him. This barren mountain had already turned into a wasteland. The battle just now had caused the entire place to collapse. Only a small part of the third barren mountain remained, and that was because it was protected by a seal. As Su Ming looked at the seal, he was just about to do something when his expression suddenly changed. He lifted his head and cast a glance in the direction of Thousand River Valley in the distance. The ripples of power in this place might have been limited to 10,000 feet, but when Sun Shan's master left just now, the power of the world he stirred up was no longer limited to 10,000 feet, which was why the powerful warriors from Evil Spirit Sect had immediately noticed it. With a glint in his eyes, Su Ming took a step forward and appeared right outside the door of the cave abode that was covered by the flowing light. He held the hidden execution of justice in his right hand and pushed forward, and immediately a strange light spread out from the eyeball. Dragon roars and tiger roars came from within. The 8 trigrams manifested, and the blood capillaries changed, as if they were making predictions. Almost in an instant, cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and the flowing light outside the cave abode immediately disappeared. The door to the cave abode opened slowly, and a powerful ray of light spread out from within. The presence of extreme yang instantly spread out, and the moment Su Ming sensed it, his body started rapidly withering away right before his eyes. Not only did Su Ming not panic, his eyes instead lit up. He was rather familiar with this presence. It was the same presence he had sensed when he was in the galaxy beyond the vortex with the ancient bronze sword in the world of Nine all those years ago. When the door to the cave abode opened completely, several long arcs charged through the sky in the distance. Su Ming stared at the cave abode, and there was only one thing floating in midair within it. It was a stone the size of a fist. It was entirely golden, and the light shining from it was like sunlight. It could make people feel warm, but to Su Ming, that light and presence were like poison that caused a large part of his body to wither away. Bright young stone, Su Ming's skin was filled with wrinkles. He looked as if he had lived through his entire life during the short span of a few breaths. A thick aura of death spread out from his body, but when it touched the light from bright young stone, it started disappearing like snow melting. He hesitated for a moment, but it was only for an instant. Without any hesitation, Su Ming charged towards the light that caused him to disappear. At that moment, he looked as if he had turned into a moth that flew into a flame. At the instant he grabbed the bright yang stone, a large amount of black smoke spread out from his right hand. An intense pain that traveled straight to his soul was almost unbearable to Su Ming, but he did not loosen his grip around the stone. Instead, he tightened his grip around it. Su Ming, if you can't even withstand this small stone and want to give up, then why did you even bother saying that you want to rush out of Death region? Su Ming let out a low growl with a pale face. As he questioned himself, he grabbed the stone, and at the instant the several long arcs closed in on him, he took a step forward, stepped into the air, and warped away. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 7:10. Su Ming took a step forward, and a large amount of black smoke spread out from his body. That black smoke contained the aura of death, and it was incredibly thick. It was enough to make all those who saw it feel their hearts tremble. If they touched it, they would not know what the consequences would be. As Su Ming endured the indescribable pain and took a step forward, the cave abode collapsed with a bang and turned into ruins. It was still surrounded by a thick aura of death. Almost at the same time, Su Ming disappeared. The several long arcs in the sky swiftly closed in on him. The person in the lead was naturally Shindong, and there were several people following behind him. All of them were the powerful warriors from Thousand River Valley and Evil Spirit Sect who had descended here. What a powerful aura of death. Who is that? I couldn't see his face clearly just now, but the thickness of that aura of death is terrifying. Could it be that he's a heavenly corpse or something with a charm? There are signs of a nascent divinity descending here as well. Shindong looked around him, and his gaze fell in the direction where Su Ming had left with a pensive look on his face. The people behind him were attracted by the strangeness of this place, and as they discussed among themselves, they retreated, not wanting to get too close to the aura of death in this place. Progenitor, should we continue chasing after him? A middle-aged man walked out from behind Shindong. There was a faint hint of wariness on his face, and once he looked at the thick aura of death around him, he wrapped his fist in his palm towards Shindong. Shindong fell into a moment of pensive silence before he spoke languidly. There's no need for that. We've already obtained the bright yang stone from Guyun Hai and completed our mission. Let's not cause any unnecessary trouble, indeed. After all, we have to carry out Sir Ji N's next mission and fight against the other sects and clans. The aura of death in this place is so thick that the person who left just now must definitely have astonishing power. There's no need for us to provoke him, an old man in red robes said in a low voice. Bao Qiu was also among them. At that moment, her heart was pounding against her chest. They might not have seen Su Ming's face clearly just now, but based on her senses, she could vaguely tell that the person exuding that thick aura of death was him. With Shandong in the lead, the group of people stayed in the place for a moment longer. Once they investigated the area, they followed behind Shandong as he turned into a long arc and gradually left into the distance. Perhaps he's the only one in the area who can do this and force a nascent divinity to retreat. When Shandong left, he turned his head around and cast a glance at the land filled with the aura of death behind him. A vision of a person he would never forget appeared in his head. Then, he cast a seemingly unintentional glance at Bao Qiu. Su Ming warped and warped once, not of those people for the time. He did not even to these people for the time. Once, Su warped, and once, and warped of the cave. Right? Su of the Ming into his body immediately, and appeared of death in and appeared. Intense pain filled his entire body. In the cave abode, Su Ming gritted his teeth and sat down cross-legged. Once he did so, he stared at the stone in his right hand. The presence of extreme yang spreading out from the stone was like a scorching sun that wanted to melt all ice. It was as if he, of a fire of his of. Su Ming's breathing quickened as he stared at the bright yang stone in his hand. Red gradually appeared in his eyes. It's just a small stone, and it's already able to put me in such a pathetic state. If I truly leave this place and go to Bright Yang region in the future, then I might just disappear in the span of a few breaths. Not only did Su Ming not loosen his grip on the stone, he even tightened his grip. I refuse to believe that with my level of cultivation, I won't be able to suppress a mere bright yang stone. Veins popped up on Su Ming's face. His cultivation base erupted swiftly from his body, and the berserker power in his body circulated through his body, causing more aura of death to spread out from his body. After a moment, the cave abode was filled with thick black smoke. The circulation of Su Ming's cultivation base became even faster in the black smoke, and he circulated all the power he could muster at that moment to suppress the bright yang stone in his hand. This stone is like fire. It might not be a problem to others, but to me, it's like my life's bane. Su Ming lifted his left hand, formed a seal, and pushed down on the bright yang stone in his right hand. With it, his left hand immediately showed signs of dissipating. His body trembled, as if no matter how hard he tried, he could not move the stone in the slightest. I refused to believe it. A dark look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Even if this stone is fire, even if I'm a moth before it, I will still use my body to extinguish it. Even if it's the sun and I'm ice, and the closer I get to it, the more I'll melt, then I will still extinguish it as I melt. Su Ming's body rapidly aged. At that moment, he looked like an ancient old man. If it was someone familiar with him, it would be difficult for them to recognize him at first glance. As his cultivation base erupted, it was as if an endless amount of ice had been poured on the sun. It continued melting and disappearing, but he still did not give up. There was a tenacity in Su Ming's bones, along with an unwillingness to admit defeat. He refused to believe that he would be defeated by a mere stone. If he could not even suppress this stone, then he did not know whether he would still have the courage to go further and walk out of Death region. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, 7 days went by. During those 7 days, most of Su Ming's body had already become indistinct. Even his consciousness was unable to withstand the intense pain. That intense pain, that feeling of disappearing, and the feeling of his life's bane was enough to make all those who endured it go mad. Su Ming gritted his teeth. He did not relax his grip on the bright yang stone in the slightest. He could put it away. He could temporarily avoid its might. He could wait until his level of cultivation was higher before he tried to suppress it. But he did not. He did not want to do this either. If there was any hesitation in his heart, if there was any thought of avoiding it in his mind, then he would lose the courage to rush out of Death region. He refused to believe that this stone could kill him. It was precisely this disbelief that caused his heart to not waver in the slightest, no matter how much pain he had to endure. During those 7 days, he circulated his cultivation base in an almost insane manner and had all of it erupt from his body to suppress the stone. If you are a flame, then I am the ice that destroys flames. If you are the sun, then I am the darkness that chases away the sun. You and I are born to be a bane to each other. Then, since you can suppress me, then I can also suppress you. Su Ming roared in his heart. On the 8th day, when all his cultivation base erupted from his body and showed signs of weakening as he continued suppressing the stone for 8 days, the bright yang stone in his hand let out cracking sound for the first time, and a crack appeared on it. Once the crack appeared, a large amount of aura of death charged into it and crashed into the entire bright yang stone. It was as if water and fire were fighting against each other. At that moment, Su Ming counterattacked from position of weakness, causing the aura of extreme yang on the bright yang stone to show signs of weakening, which was a rare sight. If any immortals saw this, they would definitely be shocked, because the bright yang stone could allow an immortal's soul to remain in the state of yang. Because of that, once they descended into Death region, they would not be too affected by this place. There were not many bright yang stones in Bright Yang region either. It was practically impossible for it to be changed, and it was impossible for it to be filled with the aura of death, because wherever it was, all aura of death would instantly disappear. Yet now, this bright yang stone showed signs of being changed and suppressed by Su Ming. Even though these were just signs and signs, and there was still a long way to go before it truly changed, the appearance of these signs was enough to make all those who saw it feel their hearts tremble in disbelief. When the 10th day arrived, Su Ming's cultivation base dried up even more, but his eyes were bloodshot, and they became even more determined. The aura of extreme yang spreading out from the bright yang stone in his hand could no longer compare to how it was 10 days ago. It might still be very strong, but Su Ming's senses would not be wrong. To him, these 10 days could be said to have been an indescribable metamorphosis. He persevered through this extreme pain and madness, and the longer he persevered, the weaker the bright yang stone became. One of these days, I will completely transform this stone and turn its life force into the aura of death. I will turn this bright yang stone into an death stone. When the bright yang stone's power became much weaker and it began to show signs of being suppressed, Su Ming lifted his left hand and sliced open a gash on his chest. At the instant it appeared, he held the bright yang stone in his right hand and pressed it against the wound on his chest. At the instant the stone touched his wound, a dazed look appeared in Su Ming's eyes for an instant. But in the blink of an eye, they returned to normal. He gritted his teeth and forced the bright yang stone into his wound, making it fuse with his body. This was his first counterattack, a counterattack against the bright yang land. He wanted to remember the feeling of being burned and the feeling of his body withering away under bright yang region. He wanted to remember all of this and slowly get used to it so that he could plan, prepare, and get used to it when he left this place in the future. Once the bright yang stone fused into Su Ming's body, he formed a seal with his hands, and his body immediately turned into a gigantic vortex. As it swept up, it sucked in all the aura of death in the cave abode with loud bangs, and it seeped into his body through the wound on his chest. This process lasted for 4 hours, and when all the aura of death in the cave abode was absorbed by him, the wound on his chest healed, and not a single scar could be seen anymore. However, there was a bright yang stone in his body, causing him to constantly have to endure that intense pain, but this pain was something that Su Ming wanted to get used to. When I can no longer feel pain, then bright yang region's destruction towards me will definitely weaken. This is what I've come to understand. The process of reversing winter and moving towards spring, from death to life. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes. In the midst of that intense pain, he slowly circulated his cultivation base, allowing it to gradually recover while maintaining the balance between his cultivation base and the stone suppression. He also spread his divine sense outwards and spread it into the depths of the ground. Another 3 days passed, and he found the spirit vein in Thousand River Valley in the depths of the ground. The first chapter is here, to be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 711. It was a curved spirit vein, and it was scattered all over the place under Thousand River Valley. More accurately speaking, this spirit vein was not complete. It was broken, and it was as if there were nearly 1,000 of these spirit veins in the depths of the ground. Each of them was incredibly weak and inconspicuous, but once there were 1,000 of them, the spiritual energy in the world that was formed was enough for Hidden Dragon Sect to take a fancy to Thousand River Valley and turn it into their branch sect. These crystal veins were known as shaman crystals to the shamans, berserker stones to the berserkers, and immortal spirit stones to the immortals. They were the most important reason Su Ming had come to Thousand River Valley this time, besides gathering spirit herbs. Several days later, when Su Ming opened his eyes in his cave abode, his expression was calm. Not a single hint of difference could be seen on his body, and no one knew just what sort of pain he was enduring at that moment. However, Su Ming knew that he had to get used to this pain and familiarize himself with it. He stood up slowly, and with one move, he disappeared from the cave abode. When he reappeared, he was already in the depths of the ground. As he moved about, he saw a layer of crystalline light before him. It was a spirit vein that was only 100-something feet long. It was curved so that it looked like a spirit vein with the naked eye, but if anyone scanned it with their divine sense, they would find that it looked like a small dragon in the depths of the ground. I hope that Hong Luo's art will succeed. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. At that moment, he had completely recovered the cultivation base he had used to suppress the bright Yangstone for the past 10 days. Once he recovered, he discovered to his pleasant surprise that his cultivation base had increased slightly. It might not be much, but it had allowed his body to recover to nearly 9/10 of its original state after he was injured all those years ago. It might have also been nearly 9/10 of its original state previously, but right now, he was only a sliver away from reaching a perfect 9/10. If this art works, then I will be able to completely recover my cultivation base within a short period of time and reach a peak that I have never reached before. Then, I will be able to try reaching Berserker Soul Realm. If I can reach Berserker Soul Realm, a brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. As he narrowed his eyes, that brilliant light gradually faded away, and he took a step towards the crystal vein before him. His body moved through the ground, but his speed had clearly become much slower. This sort of movement was incredibly taxing on his cultivation base. After a moment, when he arrived beside the crystal vein, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand swiftly, and as he formed a seal, he changed it 9 times. Ripples spread out from his body and spread outwards. As it spread out, Su Ming's body slowly became indistinct. This lasted for about a quarter of an hour before he sat down cross-legged on the crystal vein. As his body became indistinct, a strange change gradually appeared. To be more precise, this technique of devouring crystal veins comes from the 10 transformations technique of the 9 transformations, 10 transformations technique. The 9 transformations can make any divine ability or art stronger 9 times, reaching its peak. And the 10 transformations technique is a divine ability that allows a person to change. Hong Luo's power of inheritance is related to the 10 transformations technique. The item it transforms into can only be changed after the person fuses with it. And once he chooses it, he cannot change it. The 10 transformations technique allows me to choose 10 different items to fuse with. The first thing I fuse with the 10 transformations technique is a crystal vein. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. As he continued sitting down, his body continued becoming indistinct, and slowly his legs started changing. Crystals appeared on them, and they continued spreading out. After an hour, his entire body looked as if it had completely turned into crystal. In fact, at first glance, he looked incredibly similar to the crystal vein. 2 hours later, Su Ming disappeared, and in his place was a small section of the crystal vein in the ground. That extra section had the shape of a human, but it looked as if it was one with the crystal vein, and it could not be distinguished clearly. Even if there was someone beside him, they might not be able to find any clues about it at first glance. This was the 10 transformations art. The person would choose the item he wanted to transform into and fuse with it first. Once he succeeded, he would be able to turn into an item that was exactly the same as the person he chose. Not only would their appearance be similar, even their internal structure would be exactly the same. Just like at that moment, when Su Ming absorbed the first transformation of the 10 transformations and chose the crystal vein, he successfully turned into a crystal vein during the few hours he spent absorbing the crystal vein. At the same time he became one with the crystal vein, his absorption from the outside also turned into devouring from the inside of the crystal vein. The crystal vein was a complete entity, and this complete entity contained all the items within it. As time passed by, 3 days later, the crystal vein started showing signs of withering away. As it continued withering away, it gradually became dull, and at the same time it lost its spiritual power. The human-shaped crystal vein that had appeared became even brighter. On the 5th day, the human-shaped crystal vein became indistinct once again, and gradually it turned into Su Ming once again. He no longer looked as weakened as before, but had instead recovered slightly. His power had also recovered by a large margin. This method can be used. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and with a single move, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on another crystal vein that was about 100-something feet away from where he was. Once he touched it, it turned into a crystal vein and turned into a complete entity. This time, the absorption did not last for 5 days, but 4 days, and the crystal vein was reduced to powder. Time passed, and Su Ming's absorption cycle continued. The crystal veins shattered as he absorbed them, and a month later, the time Su Ming needed to absorb one crystal vein had been reduced to 1 day from his initial 5 days, and it was still shrinking. If he continued at this speed, then before long, the amount of time he needed to absorb the crystal veins in just a few days would be equivalent to the amount he needed to absorb the crystal veins for an entire month. The reason why Su Ming's absorption rate was becoming faster was because of his familiarity with the crystal veins and his changes. This 1 month of absorption allowed Su Ming to see hope. It filled his face with excitement because his cultivation base had already recovered to 9/10 of its original state. Not only did it surpass the small amount he had previously recovered, it had also increased. He could clearly sense that as he continued devouring the crystal veins, he was constantly becoming stronger. This sort of feeling was addictive, and it also made the power suppressing the bright yang stone in his body become even stronger. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The crystal veins behind Su Ming shattered, and when another half a month passed, he only needed 6 hours to absorb 1 crystal vein. As his absorption speed increased, the 1,000 crystal veins under Thousand River Valley were rapidly disappearing. Gradually, the spiritual aura in Thousand River Valley was also slowly decreasing, and this would definitely attract a lot of people's attention. Yet strangely, no one came to investigate, causing Su Ming to not be able to execute the series of methods he had prepared previously. This made him puzzled as he continued absorbing the crystal veins. Yet this was a critical moment for him, and it was not convenient for him to go out and investigate. Besides, as he continued absorbing the crystal veins, his connection with Bao Qiu was also faintly discernible, and he could not know what was going on outside. To him, no matter what happened outside, it was not as important as recovering his cultivation base. Gradually, he no longer bothered himself with it. 2 whole months had passed since he started absorbing the crystal veins. Su Ming sat cross-legged on one of the larger crystal veins, and in less than 2 hours, that crystal vein shattered. When he opened his eyes, a piercing, brilliant light shone briefly in them. 97% of my cultivation base has recovered. I'm only half a step away from great completion. Su Ming did not know just how many crystal veins he had absorbed, but he estimated that he should have absorbed nearly 100. At that moment, he needed an hour to absorb the larger crystal veins, but he only needed a quarter of an hour to absorb the smaller ones like the ones he had absorbed in the beginning. Based on this speed, I'll be able to completely recover in another month. In fact, if I can increase the speed of my absorption, then perhaps I won't even need a month. Su Ming's heart pounded against his chest. He might have long since surpassed the peak he had reached when he fought against Di Tian, but his body had yet to completely recover. There was a slight obstruction in the circulation of his cultivation base, and now that recovery was in sight, Su Ming could not help but feel slightly agitated. Di Tian, the injuries I sustained over the years are all thanks to you. Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. When he closed them, he appeared beside another crystal vein and began absorbing the crystal veins. 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. When another 10 days went by, the number of crystal veins Su Ming had absorbed surpassed all the ones he had absorbed previously. Only a small portion of the 1,000 crystal veins remained, and most of them had been absorbed by Su Ming. The speed at which he absorbed the crystal veins was so fast that he only needed 100 breaths to crush a small crystal vein. On the 10th day after the 2 months passed, the crystal vein under Su Ming shattered, and he opened his eyes. A mighty pressure so powerful that it could not be described with words erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang. His cultivation base continued rising, and as he continued recovering, he eventually reached 100%. All the parts of his body that had been obstructed in the circulation of his circulation previously were now as smooth as an ocean, causing his body to become clear, and he reached perfection. This was true perfection. All of his flesh and blood had turned into that of a berserker. Every single inch of his bones had turned into berserker bones. His blood also had a faint golden hue. His organs, his entire body. Oh my gosh, at this moment, everything was perfect. He had a strong feeling that there was only one path before him at that moment, and that was to reach the berserker's soul realm. As Su Ming observed his own body, delight appeared on his face, but it soon turned into uncertainty, and eventually, a look of uncertainty appeared on his face. He could sense that once he successfully reached the berserker soul realm, then there was a high possibility that he would be able to skip the initial stage, middle stage, and later stage of the berserker soul realm and reach great completion in the berserker soul realm. Because with his foundation, he already possessed the right to do so. However, it also meant that the process of reaching the berserker soul realm would be incredibly difficult for him. This difficulty might be 100 times greater than what a normal person would face. Fortunately, due to the sturdiness of his foundation and the fact that it was unprecedented, even if he failed to reach the berserker soul realm, his body and soul would not be destroyed like the others, but he could not fail more than 3 times. If he did, he would still die. This was something Su Ming had naturally come to understand once his cultivation base recovered and his body reached perfection. Should I go or not? Su Ming did not have a single shred of confidence in his heart. After a moment of hesitation, a resolute look appeared in his eyes. Go! If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 712. Even if he was not fully prepared, and even if the possibility of failure was incredibly high, with Su Ming's current state of completion, he was no longer trying to reach a normal berserker soul realm. He was trying to reach great completion in the berserker soul realm, and he would be crossing a large realm. But Su Ming still chose to charge forward. He absolutely could not give up on this matter. Even if he failed, he must have the courage to face it. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. With a single move, he charged deeper into the ground, until he could no longer tell just how far away he was from the surface. When the mighty pressure from the ground remained, Su Ming sat down cross-legged on a crystal vein. There was no earth around him. Instead, it was pushed to the side to reveal an empty space of about 100-something feet. The area was silent. Not a single sound could be heard. Su Ming sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. As he circulated his cultivation base at full force, his qi continued rising. This increase reached its peak in an instant, and in Su Ming's head, the principles Tian Xiezi had told his disciples about reaching Berserker Soul Realm echoed in his head. The main point of the Berserker Soul Realm was the soul. It was the great completion of a Berserker mark. With the power of the Bone Sacrifice realm in the body, the Berserker mark would be pushed forward, and once it gained physical form, it would turn into a soul. This soul could communicate with heaven and earth, allowing one to absorb the wandering energy of heaven and earth, allowing one to undergo a qualitative change and evolve. It could also be said that this was a transformation of the soul. Once his Berserker mark turned into a soul, he would gather his will and gather all the Berserker's presence and blood in his body. Then, he would form his own statue of the god of Berserkers and use it to reflect himself. Once he fused with it, he would reach the Berserker Soul Realm. Dark Mountain is my mark, and the 9th summit is also my mark. The Berserker mark on Su Ming's face manifested, and the mark of the 9th summit also manifested on his body. The plants, the trees, the houses, and everything else appeared clearly on Su Ming's body at that moment. Berserker marks were born from the heart, and when they appeared on the body, they were the entirety of a person's mind. Dark Mountain is the soul. Su Ming mumbled. Immediately, the five-fingered mountain on his face started distorting and gradually appeared behind him, as if he had turned into a mountain that was buried on the ground. 9 peaks as the soul. Tian Xie, his second senior brother, his eldest senior brother, Hu Zi, and all of the 9th summit appeared before Su Ming's eyes. With a bang, the 9th summit manifested before him. It corresponded to the dark mountain behind him, and a series of loud booms rang out in the depths of the ground. My berserker soul is the unforgettable love I have for Dark Mountain and the undying kindness I owe to the 9 summits. Su Ming lifted his arms and swung them to his sides. A brilliant light appeared in his eyes. He could vaguely see the Elder and everything in Dark Mountain. The Song of the Sun reached his ears, and as it sobbed, there was a sorrowful tone to it. At the same time, he saw the setting sun above the 9th summit. All of this gradually merged in his eyes, until it overlapped with each other, making it difficult for him to see clearly. Faintly, cracking sounds could be heard in his mind. It was as if some sort of seal was showing signs of loosening at this moment. Destiny as the heavens. As Su Ming mumbled softly to himself, the booming sounds from the depths of the ground reverberated once again. As the earth around him trembled, it started spreading outwards. The shadow of a baby appeared above Su Ming. At the same time, that shadow continued changing, occasionally turning into the purple-haired young man. The murderous aura and aura of death that surged into the sky was enough to make the ground tremble continuously. It was as if even the ground was afraid of that shadow. Soul in a mortal world. Su Ming's arms moved swiftly, and his will spread out to fuse with Dark Mountain, the 9th summit, and destiny. With his will as the center and his soul as the focus, he caused Dark Mountain, the 9th summit, and Destiny's shadow to slowly approach each other, and signs of them fusing together appeared. As the 3 of them fused together, Su Ming started trembling. He could feel the power pulling the 3 together. It came from the berserker's strength in his flesh and blood, as well as the power of his berserker bones. With everything in his body, the 3 of them were slowly fusing together. Once the fusion was successful, the 3 of them would become one and turn into a soul. Then it would mean that he had completed the first step in trying to reach the berserker soul realm. The next step would be to form the reflection of his statue of the god of berserkers, activate the world in his body, and step into the berserker soul realm. Forget about the second step. Just the first step alone was already incredibly difficult for Su Ming. He had already brought forth all his power, but he still could not make the 3 fuse together quickly. He could only slowly fuse them into one in the midst of this slow process. Besides, he had a feeling that he was missing something, but he could not figure out just what it was. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, 6 hours went by. Su Ming's entire body was drenched in sweat. His face was pale, but he gritted his teeth and persevered. The cracking sounds in his head became even more frequent, and the feeling that the seal was about to be broken became even clearer. He had a strong feeling that once the seal in his head was broken, then the legacy Hong Luo had left behind in the past for the path to life would completely erupt. As it did so, a part of his memories would be unlocked, and he would be able to see everything, including the story of how he had been buried. Almost at the same time the seal in Su Ming's head continued breaking apart, the spiritual aura in Thousand River Valley became chaotic. The weather in the sky also changed. Thunder rumbled and rumbled. Sometimes it would rain, sometimes snow would fall, and sometimes dark clouds would sink. These changes in the sky caused the hearts of all the evil spirit sect members in Thousand River Valley to tremble, and they lifted their heads to look. There's a berserker trying to reach the berserker soul realm. Shindong lifted his head and stared at the sky with an incredibly grave expression on his face. He could tell that this was definitely not a normal attempt to reach the berserker soul realm. This was just the beginning, and it had already stirred up so many changes in the sky. By the looks of it, as time passed by, these changes would only become stronger. At the same time, on a mountain range that was located an endless distance away from Su Ming in eastern wastelands was an innumerable amount of gigantic palaces standing tall on the ground. There was no end to the palace, and there were even close to 100 palaces floating in the sky. Each and every one of them gave off a dazzling light. From afar, one would discover that there was a huge sword stabbed into the ground at the center of this place. The sword was tens of thousands of meters tall, and the sword aura it gave off covered a radius of thousands of kilometers. There was a golden palace on the hilt of that sword, and the light shining from it made it look like a golden sun. This was the headquarters of Great Leaf, immortal sect in the land of berserkers. At that moment, there were two people sitting opposite each other in that golden palace. These two people looked slightly different, but their clothes were the same. They were both wearing emperor's robes and crowns. Their presences were aloof, and their expressions were chilling. One of them was dressed in a golden robe, and the other in a green robe. They might both be emperor's robes, and their colors might be different, but the presences spreading out from their bodies were astonishingly similar. If Su Ming saw the person in the green robe, he would definitely be able to recognize him at first glance. This person was Di Tian, who had fought against him in the Dead Sea, and the person in the golden robe was also Di Tian. These two people were the two clones Di Tian had sent to the land of berserkers. At the instant Su Ming reached Berserker's soul realm and the seal in his mind loosened, the green robe Di Tian's eyes flew open. A strange light appeared in his eyes, and he looked towards the area outside the palace. But a frown appeared between his brows. I can sense his seal loosening. I can't find where he's hiding. These words came from Di Tian's clone in the golden robe. He had also opened his eyes at that moment, and he spoke in a low voice. He's already out of control. My real self already knows about this, but he hasn't sent his will to me, as if he's hesitating. Our plan of many years has gone awry because of Hong Luo. The descendants of the Immortal's royal family deserve to die for this. His seal should be loosening because he's trying to reach his level of cultivation. We can't let him succeed. Since my real self hasn't sent his will to me, then we can only act with our own will. The seal formed by my real self going through countless cycles of life and death isn't something that can be broken so easily. As the two clones spoke calmly, the green-robed Di Tian lifted his right hand and pressed it against the center of his brows. After a moment, when he lifted his hand, he brought out a greenish-black stone from his body. An incredibly thick aura of death spread out from that stone. That aura of death surrounded the stone, causing it to look as if the river of hell had gathered on it. Its appearance was similar to that of a bright young stone, but its presence was completely different. More importantly, there were veins on the stone, and those veins formed the outline of a person. That person looked somewhat similar to Su Ming. This person doesn't dare show himself. He doesn't dare appear before me. He doesn't dare fight against me anymore and has hidden himself for many years. I might not be able to find him, but I can make the seal even stronger. The green-robed Di Tian said calmly. He lifted his left hand, straightened his fingers into a palm, and pressed it against the greenish-black stone. With it, the aura of death on the stone shuddered. At the same time, in the endless depths of Thousand River Valley, Su Ming, who was meditating and making Dark Mountain, Ninth Summit, and destiny fuse into his soul while the seal in his head continued loosening, shuddered violently. A sharp pain erupted abruptly in his head. That pain caused his eyes to instantly turn bloodshot, as if a mysterious power had appeared out of nowhere and made the seal in his head strengthen, causing the signs of loosening to disappear in an instant. That pain came too suddenly, causing Su Ming to shudder. The three souls fusing before him started showing signs of dispersing, and in an instant, they shattered with a bang. As they shattered, Dark Mountain disappeared, so did the Ninth Summit. Destiny also disappeared and returned to Su Ming's body, causing him to fail in his attempt to reach Berserker's soul realm. Su Ming coughed out a mouthful of blood. With a pale face, he endured the sharp pain in his head and lifted his head swiftly. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a crazed killing intent in them. Tian. The murderous intent in that voice caused Su Ming to look as if his murderous aura was monstrous. His desire to kill Tian had also reached its peak. At that moment, an incredibly strong thought erupted in Su Ming's head. Kill Tian. This was the first time he took the initiative to think about killing Tian instead of hiding and avoiding him passively. The climax is brewing. There's just one more chapter before it'll be finished. It'll definitely be finished this week, and next week, it'll explode. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 713. Even if Tian did not attack, the chances of Su Ming succeeding in his attempt to reach Berserker Soul Realm were still incredibly slim. This was something he had expected, and he had experienced it deeply during the process of trying to reach Berserker Soul Realm. However, it did not matter whether he succeeded or not. Su Ming would not avoid it. Even if he failed, he would find the light of success in his failure. However, his failure this time was not due to him alone, but to Tian's seal. This attempt to reach Berserker Soul Realm being interrupted by someone else made Su Ming's killing intent towards Tian grow even deeper. Su Ming wiped away the blood at the corners of his mouth. Blood capillaries filled his eyes, and they only slowly disappeared after a long while. However, while the killing intent in his eyes might have been hidden away, it still shone through his dark expression. If I don't kill Tian, it'll be difficult for me to reach Berserker Soul Realm. Su Ming mumbled to himself, and each word was filled with his desire to kill Tian. Su Ming had gained something from his failure this time. At the very least, he knew that reaching Berserker Soul Realm could loosen the invisible seal on his memories, and the loosening of the seal would attract Tian's attention, and he would interfere. Because of that, if he did not kill Tian, then the same thing would happen when he tried to reach Berserker Soul Realm the second time, and the same thing would happen the third time. This was something Su Ming could not accept. There was only one path before him, and that was to kill Tian. However, Tian's level of cultivation was incredibly strong. Su Ming did not have the confidence to kill him. With a dark expression, Su Ming closed his eyes and calmed his cultivation base, causing the chaotic power of his cultivation base due to his failure to reach Berserker Soul Realm to gradually calm down. It slowly returned to normal from its chaotic state, and in the end, it fused together and circulated through Su Ming's entire body. Golden light shone on Su Ming's body. That was a sign that all his flesh, blood, and bones had turned into those of a berserker. A powerful presence spread out from his body, causing the earth around him to fall back and solidify. The crystal vein under Su Ming's body shattered inch by inch into powder. That presence and the powerful power spreading out from Su Ming's body at that moment were even stronger than before he reached Berserker Soul Realm, causing Su Ming to circulate his cultivation base a few times in his body and return to normal. At the instant he opened his eyes, the brilliant light that shone in them was enough to see through the entire land of 9 abysses. The depths of the ground shuddered lightly, as if it could not withstand the mighty pressure spreading out from Su Ming once he opened his eyes. Even though I failed to reach Berserker Soul Realm, not only did my level of cultivation not decrease, it instead increased a little. Now that I've recovered 80 to 9/10 of my cultivation base, I can fight against a berserker who has attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm and not be at a disadvantage. Once I recover my cultivation base, and before I attempt to reach Berserker Soul Realm, I should be able to win against those who have attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. Now, Su Ming's eyes turned cold as he mumbled to himself. Half a step into life cultivation realm? Su Ming remained silent for a moment, then shook his head. Once I successfully reached Berserker Soul Realm, I could only be considered to be half a step away from life cultivation realm. Right now, I can only be considered to be infinitely close to it, but there aren't many who can win against me in life cultivation realm. Su Ming stood up slowly, and with a single move, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was still in the depths of the ground. He warped a few times, and when he appeared in his cave abode, Bao Qiu's urgent call immediately traveled into his heart. By the looks of it, this was not the first time Bao Qiu had called out to him. However, since Su Ming was recovering his cultivation base in the depths of the ground and was trying to reach Berserker Soul Realm, the waves of power and the mighty pressure had caused the call to be hidden from him. Su Ming lifted his head and cast a glance at the stone wall above his cave abode. After a moment of thought, he walked towards the door and gradually disappeared. The numerous evil spirit sect members in Thousand River Valley were looking at the sky at that moment. When the numerous strange things in the sky gradually disappeared and everything returned to normal, they fell silent in the midst of their puzzlement. Most of the people here could guess that the change in the world was caused by someone trying to reach Berserker Soul Realm, and it should not be a simple breakthrough. There should be some sort of change that others did not know about. However, no matter what, the change in the world had disappeared, and the deity statue of Berserker Soul Realm did not appear. This meant that the person trying to reach Berserker Soul Realm had failed. To the Berserkers, reaching Berserker Soul Realm was a state of life and death. Once they failed, their bodies and souls would be destroyed. This was a rare exception, and at that moment, most of the people here had already determined that the person who had failed to reach Berserker Soul Realm had died just now. Shen Dong frowned. As he hesitated, he felt that this might not be the case, but this was just his gut feeling. He did not have too much time to investigate it, so he shook his head and no longer bothered with it. Long arcs that had stopped in the distance just now continued charging towards Thousand River Valley in the sky. The people in those long arcs were all evil sect disciples, and they seemed to have received some sort of order over the past few days and were continuously heading towards Thousand River Valley. At that moment, there were no less than thousands of evil spirit sect disciples in Thousand River Valley, but even more of them were berserkers who had changed their blood inheritance. There were nearly 10,000 of them. This caused Thousand River Valley to be incredibly lively over the past few days. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see some clues. Most of the evil spirit sect disciples who had gathered in Thousand River Valley had solemn expressions on their faces, and there was a murderous air about them that was faintly discernible. The boisterous voices also slowly disappeared as the days passed by, and all of them fell silent. They quietly trained, quietly polished their enchanted treasures and swords, quietly looked at the world, and quietly gathered blood-red murderous intent in their eyes. Bao Qiu was meditating in one of the side halls at the top of a mountain in Thousand River Valley. She had placed a lot of seals around her, and most of the time, when she was in the form of an old woman, she would have a sullen expression on her face and would not let anyone get close to her, causing the side hall to be incredibly cold and quiet. At that moment, she was continuously calling out to Su Ming in the depths of her heart. This process had already lasted for a week, but every single time she called out to him, she would be like a stone falling into the sea. There was not a single response, as if Su Ming had already left and forgotten about this place. There was an anguished look on Bao Qiu's face as she sighed in her heart. There are only 2 more days until the day we depart, but he still hasn't responded. But I can sense that he hasn't left this place yet. Bao Qiu's expression kept changing. A seal had been placed on her soul, and her life and death were no longer in her hands. It was especially so when she thought about the battle 2 days later. As a member of the evil spirit sect Sky Devourer Rune, she would have to spread out her soul. All the people who formed the Sky Devourer Rune had to have their souls fused together to activate this powerful rune. Bao Qiu smiled wryly. She did not know whether anyone would be able to tell that something was off once her soul fused with the others. Based on her analysis, the possibility that someone would be able to tell was quite high. After all, the person in charge of the Great Sky Devourer Rune was Sir Ji An's personal attendant, and his level of cultivation was even higher than Shindong's. That was why she had been calling out to Su Ming anxiously over the past few days to search for a way to break the seal. After all, if any problems were discovered while she was casting the Great Sky Devourer Rune, then the consequences would be dire. Oh well, If he still doesn't respond to my calls before I leave, then I'll have to look for sect Elder Shindong and tell him the truth. But the seal he placed on me. Bao Qiu struggled for a moment before she let out a resigned sigh. Yet the instant she let out that sigh, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine, because an aloof voice was echoing in her ears at that moment. Why have you called out to me so many times? Bao Qiu shuddered. When she turned her head around, she saw Su Ming, who had appeared not too far behind her at some unknown point of time. His white robes and long hair made Bao Qiu immediately wrap her fist in her palm and bow towards him. Greetings, young master. Young master, Evil Sect has issued an order to launch an all-out attack. 2 days later, all of Evil Sect's forces will be fighting against the sects led by Great Leaf Immortal Sect. At that time, Evil Spirit Sect will form the Great Sky Devourer Rune. Bao Qiu lowered her head and quickly told Su Ming of all the things that had been causing her anxiety over the past few days. Yet even when she finished speaking, Su Ming did not give any sort of response. Bao Qiu hesitated for a moment, then lifted her head to look at him. At that moment, she saw a pensive look in his eyes, and she had no idea what he was thinking about. A hint of killing intent shone faintly in that pensive look in his eyes, and when Bao Qiu saw it, her heart trembled, and she did not dare look into his eyes. She had a vague feeling that Su Ming seemed to be slightly different from how he was in the past, but she could not tell exactly what was different about him. However, she had a feeling that when she faced this Su Ming, she felt the same nervousness she had when she faced Sir Jian in the past. You mentioned Great Leaf Immortal Sect just now? After some time, Su Ming asked languidly, and his gaze fell on Bao Qiu's face. This was not the first time Su Ming had heard about Great Leaf Immortal Sect. In truth, as time passed and he came into contact with them more, he could already tell from the clues that besides Evil Sect, there were also several other huge immortal sects in Eastern Wastelands and South Morning. Hidden Dragon Sect was clearly based mainly on the land of the shamans, and they also had an incredibly large amount of power in Eastern Wastelands. Sky Mist Dao's name alone was enough to tell that it was connected to Sky Mist's ancestor, and Tian Lanmeng was also among them. As for Great Leaf Immortal Sect, they occupied the land of Berserkers in South Morning and the main area of Eastern Wastelands. Di Tian's servant in the past was a member of this sect, and it was clear that Di Tian was also one of them. Yes, our main opponent in this battle is the Great Leaf Immortal Sect. After all, the emperors from the Hidden Dragon Sect and Sky Mist Sect are still unable to descend here. In Eastern Wastelands, besides Lord Jian, the Great Leaf Immortal Sect is the only one who has the right time and the right place to make Di Tian send 2 of his clones here. They are our greatest enemies. Bao Qiu quickly said. When she mentioned that Great Leaf Immortal Sect had the element of time and place, she instinctively cast Su Ming a glance. 2 clones. A barely noticeable glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and his heart turned even darker. He could tell that Bao Qiu was not lying, and there was no need for her to lie about this either. If that was the case, then his judgment had been slightly wrong. Di Tian did not send 1 clone this time, but 2. After a moment of pensive silence, a strange light appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he suddenly asked, "How confident are Evil Sect in launching this battle? With Sir Jian around, we have at least a 50% chance of success." Bao Qiu hesitated for a moment before she answered in a low voice. Jian. Su Ming mumbled. This was not the first time he had heard this name in Evil Spirit Sect in Eastern Wastelands. Gradually, a ghastly smile appeared on his lips. 2 things. First, at 8:30 tonight, let's meet at the end of each other's ears. The evening party to celebrate seeking the Devil's throne for 10 months is about to begin. Second, I will recommend Duan Run Tian Ye's new book, The Hero of the Republic. This book should have inherited his coquettish qualities, and there should be no end to his gay relationship. If you like this book, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 714. The time limit given by Eastern Wastelands Tower is 1,000 days, and the longer this drags on, the more disadvantageous it will be for the immortals. This is the same as giving the berserkers a perfect chance. That was why Jian was in such a hurry and had mobilized the entire evil sect to fight against the other sections. This must be what the other sects wanted, and they wanted to determine the victor in one battle. Perhaps there is some sort of insider trading going on in this matter. Is it being carried out outside Death region and using a huge battle to decide who will be the one to enter Eastern Wastelands Tower? A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he started analyzing the situation in his heart. He might not have any actual proof for his guess, but it should not be too far from the truth. After all, this was one of the few ways to get rid of the first god of Berserker's Eastern Wastelands Tower plan. The main point of this battle is the battle between Tion's two clones and Jian. The second part is the battle between the disciples of the immortal sects. However, since Jian was able to initiate this battle, then he must definitely have some confidence. In that case, Tion, why haven't you died yet? Killing intent shone in Su Ming's eyes. He wanted to kill Tion, but due to his level of cultivation and Tion's strength, it was difficult for Su Ming to do so. However, if Tion did not die, then he could not reach the Berserker Soul Realm. Because of that, his desire to kill Tion became even stronger. I won't be your opponent if I fight you head-on, but if I hide myself and blend in with the cultivators from Evil Sect, then when you fight against G and when you never expect me to appear, the possibility of me killing you will be the highest. That Jian from Evil Sect will also not let go of this chance. Su Ming laughed coldly in his heart. Once he thought about this idea carefully, a resolute look appeared on his face. With me around, I won't let anyone see anything wrong with you when you execute the Great Sky Devourer. When we depart 2 days later, I will fight against the immortal sects with all of you. Su Ming swung his arm and no longer bothered himself with Bao Qiu. With a single move, he disappeared without a trace. Bao Qiu was the only one left in the hall. She was stunned for a moment before a puzzled look appeared on her face. However, she soon seemed to have thought of something, and her body trembled as she turned her head to look at the palace gate. Her breathing quickened, and she only recovered after a long while. The rumors between Tion and Destiny. Could it be true? It was difficult to say for certain what was the possibility of someone attacking a powerful warrior like Tion while he was fighting against Tion. For Tion to be, even if he was a powerful cultivator in Ascendance, unless he self-destructed, it would be very difficult for him to play a crucial role. At most, he would only be able to create some opportunities for G and to take the initiative. If he was in the Ascendant stage, then he wouldn't even need to do anything. It would be useless unless his cultivation level was above the Ascendant stage and he could fight against Tion's clone. Su Ming did not possess this level of cultivation. Perhaps it was more accurate to say that he only possessed it after much difficulty. However, Su Ming could be said to be incredibly familiar with Tion's divine abilities. Realm Su Wu stage Realm D God, and he had as he needed hand. He was as he could if he and D. In fact, a few years ago, he had even fought against Tion's clone on the Dead Sea in a battle that shook the sky and earth. Su Ming might have managed to escape with the old Sunmaker's help, but if he had not possessed enough power to make Tion's clone fall into a pathetic state, then even if the old Sunmaker had attacked, Su Ming would not have been able to escape alive. Su Ming, who had not died in 3 battles, was about to initiate the 4th battle. I can't rely on G and to win this battle. Su Ming appeared at the edge of Thousand River Valley. That was where the outer sect disciples stayed. He searched for a rather remote corner and sat down cross-legged, immersed in his thoughts. He touched his storage bag. He had put away the god of Berserker Spike after he used it in the past. He could use it again, but he had to be more ingenious than the last time, or else it would not be of much use. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he patted his storage bag with his right hand. A ray of dark light appeared and disappeared in an instant. Su Ming swallowed it, and it was immediately nourished by his cultivation base. That was a spike. Most of my enchanted treasures were destroyed during the battle in the past. Han Mountain Bell has absorbed the power of a mountain from Eastern Wastelands Bell, and its power has become much stronger. I can use it now. There's also the divine lightning that Di Tian was incredibly wary of. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. His origin enchanted vessel, the Nine Hollows Cauldron, had erupted with a mighty power that he could not forget. Besides that, there are 3 other divine abilities that Di Tian's clone hasn't seen before. I wonder if they'll work. As Su Ming mulled over his thoughts, the first thing he thought of was the grass, not doll art. It's a pity that this art requires some of Di Tian's hair or some of his personal belongings. Su Ming's pupils shrank, and he suddenly thought of a possibility. As this thought rose in his head, Su Ming's heart immediately started pounding against his chest. Perhaps I don't need hair or personal belongings. As long as Di Tian is in my mind and I have an incredibly close connection with him, then I should be able to use it. Even a person should be able to use it. As long as this person is familiar with Di Tian and has a spiritual connection with him, then I should be able to do this. A cold sneer appeared on Su Ming's lips. He remembered Di Tian's servant. Su Ming had kept the black-robed old man he had captured in the world of Nine alive. He had originally intended to learn about destiny from him, but by the looks of it now, this black-robed old man was the best person to scheme against Di Tian. This person is Di Tian's servant. If Di Tian could place him in the land of berserkers to keep an eye on me, then he must be his trusted aide. Besides, this person can communicate with Di Tian and has even fused with Di Tian's clone to protect him. Then this person must have a spiritual connection with Di Tian. Su Ming fell into pensive silence, then started laughing coldly in his heart. Di Tian, you left a seal on me and made me fail when I tried to reach the Berserker Soul realm from a distance. Then today, I'll use this grass, not doll art, to let you know what it feels like. A ruthless look appeared in Su Ming's eyes, but it soon disappeared. There's also the 7 Abyssal Death Seal. This art is Shun Dong's divine ability, but he's not from Death Sect. That's why he can't execute this art to perfection. I copied it that day, and I have some confidence that I can execute it. Su Ming closed his eyes and thought about the verdant abyssal seal in his head. When he opened his eyes, his determination to kill Di Tian had become even stronger. The last is, Su Ming lifted his left hand and looked at his other 4 fingers besides his thumb. There were indistinct runic symbols flashing on the pads of his fingers, causing a brilliant light to gradually appear in Su Ming's eyes. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and winter. Su Ming looked at his right little finger. 2 days. Su Ming stood up, and with a single move, he disappeared without a trace. When he disappeared, a shifty-eyed person walked towards him from the side of the road. As he walked, he looked around and sighed nonstop. What should I do? What should I do? I'm definitely going to die in this battle. Qianshun. Oh, Qianshun, could it be that you're really going to die young this time? Ah, the heavens are jealous of geniuses. That person was naturally Qianshun. With a sigh, he sat down where Su Ming had been sitting, and with a long face, he looked at the sky in a daze. Ah, if I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to descend here in secret. It would have been so much better staying up there. I could have had girls and spirit stones if I wanted. It's all my fault for being greedy. I thought I could have a more comfortable life if I descended to the land of berserkers. Qianshun scratched his head with a distressed look on his face. Judging by his words, this person was also a berserker who had descended, but he might be the weakest berserker who had descended. As he sighed, Su Ming had already returned to his cave abode. Once he sat down, he waved his arm, and a ball of black fog immediately appeared before him. Within that fog was Di Tian's servant, the black-robed old man. However, the area around him was sealed, causing his presence to be unable to spread out. Su Ming stared at the black-robed old man, and a glint appeared in his eyes. He immediately brought out a blade of grass and tied knots on it. With each knot, he would extract a wisp of the black-robed old man's soul. Su Ming's killing intent and hatred towards Ditian caused all sorts of malicious arts to be gathered on those knots of grass, including curses, slaughter, and other malicious arts. Those curses included madness, the destruction of the spirit, suppression, death, and other thoughts. As the grass ropes were tied, a ghastly, freezing aura surrounded the area and absorbed the black-robed old man's soul, fusing it into the knots. With the power of those knots, Su Ming activated the faint connection between the black-robed old man's soul and Ditian's. With that connection, he would use the black-robed old man as a medium to curse and plot against Ditian. As Su Ming continued trying out this idea, he gradually found a connection. Gradually, when he looked at the grass rope doll, he had a feeling that he was looking at Ditian. If I don't kill Ditian in this battle, I won't be satisfied. If Ditian doesn't die in this battle, then I, Su Ming, will have to die. I will definitely not lose this battle. Su Ming held onto the doll, and the murderous aura on his face grew so strong that it caused a layer of frost to instantly appear in the cave abode around him. Time passed by, and 2 days went by quickly. 2 hours before Evil Sect's large army departed, when the sky outside started brightening up, a faint green mark appeared on Su Ming's right palm. There was an aura of death contained within that mark, but when he held it, not a single hint of it would spread out. This was the guide of verdant abyssal art that Su Ming had gathered around the grass knot doll during the past 2 days. This guide was a seal he had obtained by copying Shandong's 7 abyssal in-death seal. It might not be complete, and he would need to pay a certain price to activate it, but Su Ming still chose to use it. He had seen the might of this art with his own eyes, and he was confident that the power of in-death he could summon from this verdant abyssal seal with the aura of death would be even stronger than when Shandong executed it. Besides the green mark, Su Ming also held a grass rope doll in his left hand. The black-robed old man had already disappeared, but there was a ghastly, freezing air coming from the doll. If anyone stared at it for a prolonged period of time, they would hear shrill screams of pain. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. Once he put away the doll, he stood up and disappeared from his cave abode. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 715. It was still the same gigantic flying feng shui compass as when they came to Thousand River Valley. But this time there was not just one, but 9 of them. There were thousands of evil spirit sect disciples sitting on these 9 gigantic feng shui compasses, and most of them were from the outer sect or berserkers who had changed their blood inheritance. They looked like a huge black mass, and they gave off the feeling that they had the advantage of numbers. Around these 9 feng shui compasses were 18 gigantic Yin dragons. These Yin dragons were formed by vengeful souls, and each of them was several tens of thousands of feet long. They surrounded the 9 feng shui compasses, and as they charged forward, their roars reverberated in the air. There were nearly 10,000 people sitting cross-legged on these 18 dragons, and all of them were evil spirit sect's elite disciples. Their expressions were ghastly, and there was a wave of killing intent in their aloof expressions as they broke through the gigantic Yin dragons. There were 2 or 3 people sitting on top of each Yin dragon, and most of these people were powerful and old monsters from evil spirit sect. Shandong was standing on the head of the Yin dragon right in front of the group, and Baoqiu was also standing on the Yin dragon right behind him. Based on their presence alone, the scene in the sky far surpassed what they had experienced when they invaded Thousand River Valley. Clearly, the battle in Thousand River Valley was just a warm-up, and the real battle had yet to begin. Behind the Yin dragons were 9 gigantic carriages, and each of them was several thousands of feet big. They were all wrapped up tightly by a large amount of runic symbols, making it impossible to see what was contained within them. However, the faint pressure spreading out from them made it clear that there might be incredibly powerful murderous vessels stored within them. These 9 carriages formed a vertical line, and they looked as if they were led by a dragon as they charged through the sky. If that was all, then while it would be enough to show just how strong Evil Spirit Sect was, it would not be enough to show just how domineering this sect was. However, once the dark clouds in the sky turned into gigantic skulls, it made this group from Evil Spirit Sect look terrifying. It was especially so for the two dragons on the left and right. There were flags that were nearly 100,000 feet long that were even larger than the dragons' bodies. As they charged forward and danced in the wind, all the people who saw Evil Spirit Sect would definitely see these 100,000 feet flags at first glance. There were only 3 words written on the flag to the left: Evil Spirit Sect. There were also 3 words written on the flag to the right, and they gave off a bloodthirsty air to all those who saw them. Blood slaughter. The banner let out flapping sounds in the wind, and once it fused with the moaning sound from charging forward and the roars from the dragon, it turned into a strange, piercing sound that spread in all directions as the Evil Spirit Sect army moved forward. No matter how powerful the ferocious beasts were, all of them would lower their heads, as if they did not want to look straight at them. The many berserker tribes on the ground were also silent at that moment. Su Ming sat cross-legged on one of the 9 feng shui compasses surrounded by the 18 dragons. He looked at the sky before him with a calm expression. As he circulated his cultivation base, he prepared himself for the battle that would shake the heavens. Evil Spirit Sect could be completely destroyed in this battle, and the immortal sects could be massacred. These were not things Su Ming cared about. He only cared about one thing, and that was Di Tian's death. Di Tian had to die in this battle. Senior, we are truly fated to meet again. I didn't expect that we would meet again here. Senior, you must save me this time. Su Ming stared at the sky in the distance. When killing intent shone in his eyes, a sobbing voice reached his ears. Su Ming did not even need to turn his head around to know that this voice belonged to Qian Shun. Qian Shun had a tight grip on the handles prepared for each person on the feng shui compasses so that his body would not be swept away as they charged forward. He circulated what little power he had in his body swiftly, and once he managed to stabilize himself, he moved slowly on the 8th feng shui compasses to ask for help from a large number of people. When he saw Su Ming, delight immediately appeared in his eyes, and he crawled over desperately to look at him with a pleading look. He knew that this person was definitely not an ordinary person and was definitely someone who had been hiding his strength. Qian Shun also remembered how this person had disappeared without a trace during the battle in Thousand River Valley. Senior, all 4 great sects and evil sect have moved out this time. It's a pity that we don't know where they will gather, but this time, all the prodigies in evil sect will be gathered together. It doesn't matter whether it's the old monsters or the new generation. All of them will appear. For example, Evil Dust Sect Sikong. He's the strongest among the younger generation in Evil Dust Sect. He's someone who can stand on equal footing with Evil Spirit Sect Shanhen. A thought appeared in Qian Shen's head, and he immediately said these words. He knew that he did not have anything worthy of Su Ming's attention, but when he thought about how Su Ming had hidden his power and came to Evil Spirit Sect, then the more he knew about Evil Sect, the better it would be for him. This was a matter of life and death, and Qian Shun could no longer care about anything else. He would tell him everything he knew. He was a berserker who had descended to Evil Spirit Sect, and he was not someone a normal disciple could compare to. Hence, he knew a lot more things. Sikong, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he turned his head to cast Qian Shun a glance. Qian Shen's spirits immediately lifted. He felt that he had found a chance to show off, and he immediately spoke up once again. Senior, look at the man on the 3rd dragon. He's the biggest one. He's Shanhen from Evil Spirit Sect. Qian Shen pointed at the 3rd dragon in the distance. When Su Ming looked over, he also saw the man standing on top of the dragon's head. That person was incredibly big and built. As he stood there, he looked like a small hill, and there were ripples of power that were not weak within his body. There were also a lot of vengeful souls surrounding him, and all those who saw him could not help but feel their hearts tremble. Shanhen, Su Ming looked at the man. In truth, when he first went to Evil Spirit Sect, he had already noticed this person feeding vengeful souls. Shan Hen. If Bei Ling and Chun Xion's matter had not happened, Su Ming would not have thought too much about it. Yet now he had come to understand quite a lot of things, which was why he did not show any abnormalities at that time. He only cast the man a deep glance before averting his gaze. Those who have familiar names won't be able to recognize me with my current appearance, Su Ming thought quietly in his heart. Which Sikong are you talking about? Su Ming asked languidly. Qian Shun was momentarily stunned. He did not know why Su Ming would ask this question, but he quickly answered. Sikong. Su Ming fell silent. But speaking of which, the strongest among the younger generation in Evil Spirit Sect isn't this Shan Hen, it's Wu Shun. However, Wu Shun went out to train many years ago and isn't in the group this time. But I'm thinking that the sect will definitely contact him since this is such a huge matter. We should be able to see him in the gathering spot of Evil Sect. Qian Shin stood by Su Ming's side. When Su Ming no longer asked any questions, he told him everything he knew. As for Evil Lust Sect's strongest disciple, her name is Bai Su. Su as in Su Rong. She's a woman, but her potential is incredibly shocking. She, Wu Shun, and Sikong are famous in Evil Sect in the land of berserkers. Interesting. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. So Wu Sun from Windstream Tribe is Evil Spirit Sect's strongest disciple, and the Bai Su from my memories is a woman called Bai Su. Su Ming's expression was calm. These things were not secrets, and it would not be difficult for him to learn about them if he wanted to. What Qian Shun said was not of much value. Perhaps he saw Su Ming's calmness, but after a moment of hesitation, Qian Shun gritted his teeth and got closer to Su Ming before speaking in a low voice. Then there's Sir Shun Dong from Evil Spirit Sect. Senior, you should be familiar with this person, but you definitely don't know that this person has an extraordinary status in the land of immortals. He's one of the 3 absolutes in the 3 inferior sects of Evil Sect. Evil Sect is divided into the 3 superior sects and the 3 inferior sects in the land of immortals. The 3 inferior sects are Evil Spirit, Evil Dust, and Evil Lust. As for the 3 superior sects, they're Evil Sky, Evil Tao, and Evil Immortal. The ones who descended in the land of berserkers this time are Evil Immortal Sect, one of the 3 superior sects, and they brought the 3 inferior sects here. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he looked towards Qian Shun. When Qian Shun saw that Su Ming was interested in this, he quickly continued, speaking in a low voice. Sir Shun Dong is one of the 3 absolutes in the 3 inferior sections. The other 2 absolutes are Sir Shi Hai from Evil Dust Sect and Bai Su from Evil Lust Sect. These 3 people have attained great completion in ascendance, and they possess the complete constitution to descend in the land of berserkers. The restrictions of the berserkers' laws of death are practically non-existent to them, unlike the descenders from thousands of years ago who were suppressed to the point where they could only display a small portion of their cultivation base. Su Ming looked at Qian Shun. He did not expect that he would know about these things, and by the looks of it, he was not lying. There's also the Evil Immortal Sect. This sect is one of the 3 high sects and is extremely powerful. Even though their descent is incomplete, with Lord Ji and's presence, he can make up for everything. This Lord Ji and is one of the 3 sovereigns of Evil Sect. Qian Shun could be said to be someone who would not stop until he shocked Su Ming with his words. He continued telling him everything he knew so that Su Ming would think that he had the right to be protected. 3 sovereigns. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. That's right. The immortals might only occupy 3/10 of the galaxy in Morning Dao World, but we're one of the biggest factions of power. We have the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors among us. The 3 sovereigns are an Evil Sect, and the 5 emperors are in immortal sects. Lord Jian was the Dark Extermination Sovereign of the 3 sovereigns. As for Great Leaf Immortal Sects Dtion, he was the Celestial Emperor of the 5 emperors. Qian Shun said in a low voice. Su Ming's heart trembled. This was the first time he heard about the immortals. If this had come from the mouth of someone with great power, he would not have been surprised. But the person who told him this was Qian Shun. What is the level of cultivation of the 3 sovereigns of evil sect and the 5 emperors of immortal sects? Su Ming immediately asked. I'm not too sure about their specific levels of cultivation, but according to the rumors among the immortals, besides Sovereign Qi, the other 2 sovereigns have already reached the 3rd step. As for the 5 emperors, besides the Yellow Emperor, the other 4 are also almighties in the 3rd step. However, these are just rumors. With my status, I don't know whether they are true or false. The 3rd step. The description of the immortals' cultivation system from Hong Luo's legacy appeared in Su Ming's head. If that's the case, then evil sect's power among the immortals is weaker than that of the immortal sects. But if they can stand against each other, then there must be some clues to this, Su Ming said slowly. Qian Shun blinked, then grinned. Once he looked around, he whispered something in a mysterious manner. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.